Welcome back, movie fans, to another episode of The Movie Date with Rob and Matt, a podcast for people who like movies but don't want to be smug about it or don't want to be spooky about it. Because it's Halloween. It's Halloween. That's why I did that.
Yeah.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
Hey, I'm Matt, or Matthias, the vampire, or whatever, out in the daylight.
Yep. It's Halloween.
it's
We're doing a spooky episode.
My favorite time of the year.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you said that last time.
Yeah, I love.
I don't listen.
I love Halloween.
I'm not a good listener.
The weather changes. It stops being hot. It's the fall comes around. It's my favorite. I love fall. I love early parts of winter. I love getting sweaters out. I love the leaves changing. I mentioned that before. I always love spooky stuff, so it's like everyone's getting in on the spooky stuff. It's time to just.
We're going to talk about some spooky stuff later.
Today.
Or are we? Are we?
Well,
yeah,
these things have legacies.
That's interesting you say that because that's one of the points I'm going to bring up when we talk about the one that I saw. But anyway,
yeah. Same with this one because I had to put myself in the mindset of if I were an audience member at the time this came out, yeah, this would be really freaking creepy.
I had to do that too.
Suspend your disbelief.
It's real hard at times, but I liked it more than I thought I would.
Well,
but maybe that's not that much.
What's on the what's on the slab?
Well, you were talking
slab.
about one of my favorite horror movies, and it's a crying shame because I love werewolf lore and I love werewolf mythology.
And this is a movie that adds some things into it, like the whole thing about
stuff that
like anyone you kill is going to haunt you because they were killed for unceremonious reasons.
Yeah. We were talking about American Werewolf in London and how there is a doldrum of good werewolf movies that I wish there were more of. I've seen the sequel to it. I've seen,
which, by the way, I didn't realize American Werewolf in Paris came out in 1997. That's 20-something years after the 1981 one. Like, what was the point? Landis had nothing to do with it. Nobody was in it. Like, why bother?
I just remember watching it and being like, it's okay.
Well, then there's
it's a weird. It tries to be we're getting off topic. We're not because it's spooky stuff. But it tries to be funny, but it's not funny in the way that John Landis is funny. And by the way, a lot of times with horror comedies, I don't think they're that funny. It's very rare that because they're either. I would much rather have like a horror comedy that has a handful of jokes, like Tusk. Is like that, where it'll ruin your day,
right?
But it's like there are some genuinely funny moments that I laugh at and stuff. But then there's it's hard for me to suspend the terror when I'm like, but Justin Long is being turned into a walrus right now. Like how do I laugh at this or whatever?
Right.
American Werewolf in London has some of that. I don't laugh at it because even though I know he wants me to. But there are a couple scenes where I thought it was cool. I like the tragedy and the horror of it more than I like the funny.
Yeah, it is. It takes its time too. Like it makes you wait for that werewolf, but once you get to the werewolf effect, like I forgot that you actually get to see the whole thing.
Yeah, it takes like 5 minutes.
God bless Rick Baker because that thing looked. I mean, everyone knows about the transformation sequence. I'm still watching that. Like, how did they do that? How did they do that? That's incredible. But then you see the beast, and it's like. Obviously, they're shooting a lot at night because, it obviously doesn't look perfect, but it looks pretty freaking good.
It looks good. It looks the best of its time.
Yeah.
Today,
it was 1981. I mean, nobody could top that at the time.
Yeah, today you could maybe do better, but what we have yet to get is like a really great werewolf movie that blends the practical and the CG. Because you either get like Underworld, where it's just a bunch of CG sort of esque werewolves that look kind of like ink blots when they move fast.
They don't need to have any definition of anything, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. And or you'll get like the horrible rubberiness of American Werewolf in Paris. But also sometimes you get like a weird
The Howling is one that stands out because
it is, but I don't think it's as good as London.
Right.
I think there's the part
where then there's like Dog Soldiers. Those are the only two that come to mind as the Howling.
Dog Soldiers is pretty solid. Dog Soldiers is good. It was voted like best direct-to-DVD movie the year it came out or whatever. And I was like, that feels right. It's also by a director I like who did a bunch of Game of Thrones and he did, I've talked about it before. Maybe we should do a blind date on this episode. But The Descent.
Oh, was that guy?
Mm-hmm. The Lady Cave Divers. He did the sequel too, which is less good.
Well, The Descent, I remember when it came out.
And he also did the movie that you like, Doomsday.
Oh, it's that guy. Okay.
It's not, but I've always wanted like a killer.
Something Marshall?
Neil Marshall.
Neil Marshall?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he did Battle of the Black Water and some really cool Game of
Yeah,
Thrones
Neil Marshall's
episodes.
a pretty established guy.
Yeah,
He can- he can do-
I
he can
kind
do
of
some
I
stuff.
low key keep an eye on him whenever he's doing something and whatever. I've always wanted like a really killer werewolf movie that just like gets it right. It doesn't have like a weird subplot where they're also train heisters or something like that. I'm like, okay, what's werewolves in and of themselves are scary. Imagine being trapped in the woods with like a grizzly bear, but times 2. Like it's
it's
that
like
bad.
it's like an idea I had last night when we were watching. I'm like, they should just do like an American Werewolf in Germany, but set it in like 1942, and it's an American GI fighting the Nazis, and he's a werewolf, and he's just tearing up Nazis.
Yeah,
it's
but-
not scary,
Yeah, it's not
but you get
scary.
some good. You could probably get some good gore in it.
Yeah.
you know,
And I think that's what they often shortchange it for is
gore.
they give it more gore as opposed to scariness.
Well, that's the thing about a werewolf is werewolves kind of are just pure forces of carnage, you know, like
Brutality. I'm not saying I don't like the gore, but I like the scare. I like the idea. There's a couple of movies that even though they're not great, like The Howling comes real close at times. I think what lets it down is like that it's that weird transformation effect which takes like 9 minutes or whatever. I'm just like, you could run away right now. I'm just like, he'd never catch you at this rate. Like,
See, that's one of the things like I liked in
also, The
in-
Howling is based off a book, and it spawned like 9 sequels, which are all bad.
Yeah, at least American Werewolf only had 2, and one was like, why did we making this?
2 sequels?
Well, I mean,
the
just the
original.
one. It just has Paris.
And also, like it is scary. Like it nails the atmosphere really well.
Well,
Like,
that is.
the
It's-
first time his
it's-
buddy gets killed by the werewolf in the foggy moors or whatever, and the townsfolk all know what's about to happen. And I was like, this is good atmosphere.
And also good acting, like those 2 guys who play
David Naughton,
David Naughton
And
and
the other one. the guy who gets murdered,
yeah, whose name I
who
can't
slowly
recall.
becomes more skeleton.
He's great.
Yeah.
Like he has the decay effect on him until he's literally just a puppet.
Yeah.
Is kind of great. I also love that Frank Oz is in it. Obviously, Frank Oz is in it. Because if you ever just see Frank Oz and hear him, you'll hear Yoda and Kermit.
Yeah.
And just be like, "Yep, that's
Uh-huh.
that's him. That's him."
When that guy gets like attacked and his buddy just leaves him, and then he's like, "Oh, I got to go back for him." It's terrifying, but I have
like,
to save him.
We like these guys have just been sort of like not doofy, but they're just like bros this whole time. And then when he gets attacked, I mean, he's just like, "Oh God, it's killing me!" It's like,
It's
ooh,
awful.
that's pretty gut dropping.
It's
It's
awful.
pretty awful. And then you see the look on his face, like, "Oh no!"
It's like the scene from The Revenant where he gets attacked by the bear, but a friend leaves him to die.
Right.
Like it's like that if that
It's-
had happened,
it's-
and he has no gun and he's not prepared or
Nope.
anything like that.
But and I also what I was not expecting about American Werewolf, because it's been so long since I've seen it, and I mostly remember the first 30 minutes more than I remember anything else, is it ends abruptly.
Yeah.
Like abruptly.
He just
like
he changes again. By the way, after the first time you change and like wake up naked in the zoo, you should be like there's enough werewolf lore to know that like, oh, I turned into a werewolf last night and killed a bunch of people.
well, eventually when he figures it out, he's like goes to that police officer like, arrest me, I killed those people. Like he believes it. Like he's
Yeah.
all in. He starts throwing around slurs at the Queen and Prince Charles.
That's one of those things where I know I'm supposed to laugh and I'm just like, this isn't
It
me.
doesn't work. Well, I think also it's like, I wonder if they could have cast some people who are a little more charismatic. Like David Naughton does a good job, but
He does a good job at
He-
everything but the comedy.
right, the comedy doesn't work.
Yeah.
He's good at the moment like it cuts to him reading the book, and then all of a sudden he's like, "Oh God, it hurts."
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's good.
He sells on that, but yeah, he's not very funny.
No.
They're both not that very funny. And
There's
it's like you need someone a little more charismatic. Like if you gotten an actor that had been a little more like really chummy, like an SNL kind of guy, then well, it would have changed the tone of the movie. But then to see that person turn into a violent monster, there's the thing where you're like, how do you make good horror comedy? Is you have to go all in on the horror. with something that's funny. Again, I think I've talked about Shaun of the Dead a few times where I'm like, what makes Shaun of the Dead work for me? And I don't think Shaun of the Dead is a scary movie.
No, it doesn't scare me at all, but it's
But
just
it is
funny.
but
you have to choose which side you want to plant your flag on,
Right.
and lean on that, and then
is
anything
the
else is
genre
okay.
element funny, or are the people funny? Because Shaun of the Dead is just a literal, actual Romero zombie movie, but British comedy actors are in it, and yet the comedy's not on the zombies.
Yeah.
Those zombies will rip you to pieces.
Yeah.
And then not for humor.
Also, there's like that weird part where, like, near the very end, where the acting gets real serious.
Yeah.
And stuff.
That's something that
And just, like,
Edgar
comes
Wright
out of
loves
nowhere.
doing. Is like there are stakes.
Yeah.
Of
But
course, everything pays off. I could watch that again.
I'm weirdly finicky about horror comedy because I don't ever like, people say like it's the best horror comedy I've ever seen. It's like, but the horror, is there horror in it? And
well,
I'm
did
like,
you find probably the one that everyone talks about the most is Cabin in the Woods?
oh, I haven't seen that in so long. That's the Eli Roth one, right?
You're thinking of Cabin Fever.
Cabin Fever.
Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the Woods is Drew Goddard.
Yeah, it's Drew Goddard. It's a lot of
Yeah, I've seen
Joss
that.
Whedon's crew.
It's good.
I love it. I mean, I don't think there's a thing about it that's not to love.
I don't know if it's scary, but it's interesting.
Yes,
is what I would lean on.
There
And that's the thing as I get to about horrors. I love to be scared, which is why I get very frustrated when I watch a scary movie and it's just it confuses death with scariness. At some point I just be like, yeah, cut his head off. Yeah, drink his blood. Go for it. Like
Yeah.
at some point I'm rooting for the killer because I hate the characters or I don't give a shit.
Watching me watch horror movies, there's a moment when
know what you're gonna
when the guy is in the when he turns into the werewolf in the porno theater at Piccadilly Circus.
Yeah.
And all the cops are then the two detectives that have been there from the beginning run up like, what's going on here? And he busts through the door and rips that guy's head off, and his head rolls down. I'm getting up going, yeah, awesome. I love it. Because
Yeah.
I forget, like, at that spot when he's running around as the werewolf, cars are crashing, people are flying out of cars, people get run over by buses. It turns into a bloodbath that is tangentially werewolf related.
Yeah.
It's mostly just people. It turns a little bit into Final Destination, like, and I kind of love it. It's so crazy.
I'll give them the gore, but I would say like it's sort of like it's like a Darth Vader scene or like a Death of Superman instance. Like I feel like you have to earn it. You have to earn the gore because I like to feel scared, and this is where modern horror movies have kind of like the good ones kind of spoil you, is because there's some really great ones that get the scaring right, where when the gore happens you're like, you don't even care about the gore, you care about like, this is awful. Like Hereditary is the one that is kind of the new gold standard for me.
Yeah, because the gore in it is not for like, whoa, it's like, oh god.
But to quote to quote you, it is like the scene where Charlie hits her head on the telephone pole. There is a terrible sense of like, oh no.
Well, they make you sit with
But
it.
there's also the part where you see her head, and I think Ari Aster is like you said in the corner, like, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, yeah. Everyone else is like,
Oh god.
because it's also cut with Toni Collette screaming
Horrible
like a
scream, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. There needs to be better
Talking
werewolf
about-
movies. And you wanted to talk about there's a thing with John Landis that happened.
Talking about earning it, like, because American Werewolf in London takes so long to get to seeing David as the werewolf.
Yeah.
You do earn it, because I remember the first time you actually see it is he's hunting the guy in the tubes.
Yeah.
And the camera is doing really great work because Landis is a really solid director. And all you hear mostly is growling, and like a paw will come out and like pull someone away. Like
that's the first time you see
it come
down
around
the
the
stairs,
stairs.
and it's on its all fours.
And
I was
it's-
like, that's good.
yeah, that talk about earning it is you earn how good your effect is by waiting on it. It's the Jaws thing where it's like the shark sucks, but if we barely show it, it'll scare an entire generation into being afraid of sharks.
Yeah, that's true.
So John Landis,
Yeah.
and actually,
His son is a turd.
his son is a turd. Shudder has a series.
He'll hear this and he'll post a giant Twitter rant about it, I'm sure.
I don't think anyone's
The movie
gonna-
cast is a Mary Sue or something like that. Is what he's gonna say.
I don't think anyone would know.
Yeah.
There's
Is he
a.
working on anything anymore?
I think he's been properly canceled.
Good. Get that guy out of there.
So there's like Shudder has like a little thing called Cursed Films. It was like a little mini documentary series talking about movies that, especially particularly horror movies that had notorious events surrounding them.
Yeah.
Poltergeist, where a surprising amount of the crew died. And, the whole thing like, oh, did they use, actual corpses in the pool scene, all that. I love that movie. That's one of my favorites. Exorcist, obviously, movies like that. Well, they get to the Twilight Zone movie, which was an effort primarily by Steven Spielberg, and a lot of them to be like, this is the new class of like 1970s, the new great filmmakers. So you get Spielberg in there, you get Joe Dante,
George Miller,
and
the other one. I can't remember.
No, that's it.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's Steven Spielberg, Joe Dante, George Miller, and John Landis. So you can kind of get an idea at this point. George Miller has done the first Mad Max. He's working on Road Warrior
probably.
right now. No, this is 1983.
Yeah.
In 1983. So Werewolf had just come out in 81.
Yeah.
Spielberg,
Jaws was the late 70s.
78, I think.
Yeah,
so
like he
he's
was
got
kinda
some
there.
time on that. Joe Dante was working, I think, on Gremlins. So all of that's coming around, and essentially they're like, we're just going to adapt a bunch of Twilight Zone stories and just do a new thing. Well, John Landis does the first one, and it's just kind of like it's TV actor Vic Morrow plays a bigot who his punishment in the Twilight Zone sense is he's sent back to various situations where he's the marginalized class. Like he's sent to Poland and he's being pursued by Nazis, or he's being chased on a plantation and all these other stuff like that. Well, eventually it all rounds up to him being in Vietnam, and he's trying to protect these two young Vietnamese children from being slaughtered by American GIs. And the whole thing was they wanted to get this set working perfectly, so they skirted some laws regulating when they could do something, especially with child actors. Like they can't, like because of child labor laws, you're not allowed to have children on set between a certain amount of time, like past like a certain date. I don't know the whole details.
Yeah.
It's very legalistic because of what happened.
Yeah.
And they wanted to have a live helicopter. So they went out to like this area in Southern California that was like outside by the mountains, because they built a whole village and set up all these pyrotechnics. So there's explosions and everything. They worked it out. And they had a helicopter going overhead. And they didn't go through it all well enough. And they were so like, let's get it done. Let's get this shot. And one of the pyrotechnics caused the helicopter to lose its spin and tumble down to the lake bed where they were shooting it, and the blades landed on Morrow and the two children and essentially beheaded them on camera, and they died instantly. And it was a nightmare. It was an absolute disaster because and you can go in, look up all the information about it.
This is from the Twilight Zone movie.
This is from the Twilight Zone
This
movie.
is from the segment that John Landis directed.
Yes, Landis was on set and he was involved, the producer and everything. Spielberg wasn't there. Nobody else was involved in it, but they were all sued. They all had to go to court. And to this day, a lot of people are essentially kind of like, Landis sort of got away with manslaughter, like because of skirting those labor laws and everything, because nobody went to jail. Everyone was fine. They were able to pay off the fines and all that. It's not my place to make one statement or another. A lot of people say that because John Landis is kind of an asshole, and a lot of people know he's an asshole, and he's a dick. And so everyone's kind of like, well, his dickishness, especially being a young buck director, led to people getting killed.
Yeah, I think there's an argument to be made there. Judging from what you've told me. This is the first I've ever heard about.
Really?
This.
It's one of a big notorious.
Did they ever say anything? Did they ever like issue any public statements? Like, did Spielberg say anything about it? Like,
I don't recall.
you'd have to imagine they'd at least issue public apologies or something.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, no, public apologies are made. He was interviewed. Everyone was, lots of money got paid out by the families. Various union laws and laws related to in the filming world were set up because of this, especially for safety and things like that, because it's like this was a landmark tragedy that and it's pretty fricked up, man. It's pretty wild. You can see the video. It's not particularly graphic, but you can see that helicopter land on them and they're just gone.
it's
like
awful.
it's awful. But that's kind of something that's haunted John Landis his whole career.
Yeah, because he hasn't ever come back from that.
He did some stuff after.
I can't remember the last John Landis movie.
Yeah, no, later on, I can't think of anything because he didn't direct like Blues Brothers 2000. That was Frank Oz.
Yeah. I can't think of anything. I
Yeah,
can't think of
I mean, he
anything else.
had some movies after. He had a bunch of comedies. I think he was involved with Trains, Planes, and Automobiles or things like that. Not Trains, Planes, and Automobiles. Trading Places.
Yeah.
And some things like that. So he still had a career in comedy, but he moved away from that more like hands-on kind of stuff. Like even the Blues Brothers was so very technical. And I think he toned it down to be like, play it as safe as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument is like manslaughter implies that like you, through negligent actions or were drunk or something like that, accidentally killed somebody. You might have an argument if John Landis is flying the helicopter, but I think
Right.
it's one of those things where his attitude and his on-set behavior probably led to practices that were dangerous, and I think that's probably true.
That's kind of the understanding. Is it's like let's wrap it up, and that. But
Which
they
leads
did.
to my thing that I say about like asshole directors is like there's just no need for it anymore. There's no way to be an asshole director and have it make sense or be like, but I need to be a dick so I can get this great performance. It's like
It's so indulgent.
it
and it's
feels
so-
silly nowadays.
Well,
It's almost as silly as like an actor who needs 400 takes or whatever to like and needs to be in the right headspace. At some point, like if I'm a director, I'm like, say your lines, asshole.
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah, and it's
Do your job.
At some point, like everyone just needs to just chill.
Yeah.
They're just movies.
Well, it's funny how horror movies always have this. William Friedkin on the set of The Exorcist was particularly abusive, and
Yeah.
I know obviously
Stanley
Kubrick on the
Kubrick,
set
yeah.
of The Shining was abusive, and
Those days are gone, man.
yeah, we don't need
For
them.
for better reason. I think so.
Wes Craven never was abusive, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
That's kind of all I want to say about that. American
Yeah.
Werewolf is really
We
solid.
need better werewolf movies. Is
Yeah,
what I want to
we
say.
need better
about it.
werewolf movies.
We need.
I mean, did
we
you ever
need-
see the original Wolfman, the original Lon Chaney Wolfman?
Yes, I have. It's all right. I mean, again, like legacy
Right.
in quotes or whatever.
Important for the era.
Even the new Wolfman, I don't hate. It comes the closest to trying to create an atmosphere
Del
of
Toro?
werewolves are scary, remember? But like, I don't think that. I think now we replace werewolf movies with like cool horror. Well, you know what werewolves need? Werewolves need like their Lost Boys. They need a Lost Boys for werewolves because that's one of my favorite vampire movies. And I have the same criticism of a lot of vampire movies as they become either action movies or spoof comedies. And like What We Do in the Shadows is great, but like
right, because they were gonna make that werewolf spinoff of the characters of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I
God,
also
What We Do in the Shadows.
I am-
is 10 out of 10.
I am a bit of a purist when it comes to some horror. Is I don't like to change it up when it comes to vampires. I like spooky vampires, and I've always wanted a Robert Eggers, like a real auteur kind of stylish director to be
Well,
like,
we should
here's
be getting
classic.
that Nosferatu someday.
We should, but I think he might have put that on the back burner for his new the action
For Northman.
epic he's doing.
Yeah, for Northman.
I think that I really like the idea of like a classic, like cerebral Dracula, where you don't know what this guy is, and I like the idea of a great werewolf movie. And there's a couple ones that I like. Do you have any other ones? Like I remember there's a
well,
movie.
that's the thing. Like, I don't really care about werewolves that much.
Oh,
I
Matt.
don't really care about werewolves because in the end, I think the werewolf is kind of getting pushed aside by what a lot of modern internet horror has done, which is push forward the Native American Wendigo and the Skinwalker and everything. And I think that creature is now sort of taking place of the werewolf, I think, in a way.
I've
because
heard about that movie. I heard it was bad.
Which one?
It's called Wendigo.
Oh, it's probably garbage. Yeah, but they haven't had a mainstream movie about like skinwalkers or Wendigo. But
There's a role-
it's huge in the creepypasta world, like
Yeah.
the new modern internet horror world. They got no love. The kids don't like werewolves anymore, man.
That's because they don't make good ones. They make a movie like Love and Chocolate. Do you ever see that movie? It's the dude from Hannibal, Will Graham. He plays Will Graham. What's his name? Hugh Dancy.
Hugh Dancy.
And then it's him, and he's researching something called the Loup Garou from like Paris or whatever, and they were supposed to be werewolves, but they just turn into wolves.
Oh.
And it's like he falls in love with one of them, and it's a shitty, like romantic, slightly creepy at times movie. It's just bullshit. I want my fucking like, and like there's a new werewolf movie that came out, like I think like just recently called The Wolf of Snow Hollow, which is supposed to be quite
I've
good.
heard about that
Yeah,
one.
which I
I've heard
wanted to
that's
watch.
good.
It's Jim Cummings, and I wanted to check that one out. Werewolves just need like, and there's some great movies I've seen. There's a movie, and it's like a weird French drama about a girl who's a werewolf, but she just lives with it like an alcoholic. Like she chains herself up every full moon and has like a bowl of raw meat, and it's about like how it's sort of like an analogy for like homo what's the word, like when you deny your own homosexuality.
You mean like closeted, self-hating
like,
sort
it's
of?
about like because like if Brokeback Mountain is about how if you conceal a part of yourself you suffer, it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
And eventually it comes out, and she does have like some cool werewolfy scary moments, but it's not scary enough. It's too much of like a weird indie drama thing. Like I just want like a good werewolf movie, and like lean into all the Native American stuff and the occult and the lore.
A lot of the werewolf stuff is like originally kind of very similar to the vampire lore. It's all very Eastern European, very Germanic, because a lot of the original werewolf stories came from serial killers from like Germany that were just like, I think I remember this, I read of this somewhere, watched a video on it. It was like, oh, some of the first stories of werewolves were villages that's like their children were getting slaughtered by something in the woods, and they traced it back to a man, but some of them claimed that the man could turn into an animal of some kind, or obviously, shapeshifters are worldwide, but I remember that specific story relates to like an actual documented event of killings that went on in like 1500s Germany or somewhere. You'll have to look that up, but that's kind of like a jumping point for a lot of.
I can hear the
stories.
audience yawning at my werewolf pining. It's just, you know what this is? This is the episode where I did I made you watch the Baldur's Gate 3 trailer, and I was like, why can't we have a great Dungeons and Dragons movie? And you're like, well, Rob, and you put on your glasses, like, here's why, and I just feel sad again. But let's talk movie news.
Well, I do think you just got to you guys got to get the right script, and I think. Going back to American Werewolf, that's kind of a really good one. Like that's kind of as close because it's got lore, it's got its own set of rules, and but it doesn't play its hand too much. Like whenever they go to the slaughtered lamb, when they go to the bar or the pub, they see the pentagram and the melted candles, and like, well, that's been there for 200 years, and they never go further into it. It's just the whole village is like, we don't talk about it, we don't want anyone to know about it. It's this shame.
Why? Tell them. We got a giant monster around here that kills people.
But they never. It's enough that it's like it keeps them all like in check, but they never really go further with it. And I kind of like that because there's this age of mystery. And then when the movie just abruptly ends,
who's the guy?
The original guy?
Yeah, when they kill the werewolf, he turns back into a man, and you're like, who's that?
Yeah, it was just some guy. Because they said like, oh, his wounds. Talking about David's, his wounds had already been. Prepped and taken care of before the police arrived, because then he's like 3 weeks in a coma.
Yeah.
Also, real quick, before we go on, there's that dream sequence.
I know what you're talking about.
Where these pigman Nazis bust into his home and slaughter his family. It's awesome. Don't get me wrong, but what?
It's just there.
It's just, hey, Rick Baker, could you make some pig Nazis? Because I thought it was like a reference to, like, at one point, the two nurses, one played by Jenny Agutter, the one who becomes his lover, were just like, oh, I think he's Jewish. And I'm like, is this like an internal fear that he has as a Jewish man that, like...
It's not brought up in the story at all.
No, it's not brought up in the story. It's just special effects showing off, and it's like you're watching kids get gunned down by Uzis. Like, it's so bonkers.
It's crazy.
I love it. I love it to death, but it has nothing to do with that movie. Yeah. Anyway, if someone has anything... I would have to look at what John Landis has to say about that, or Rick Baker, and be like, yeah, no, it means this. I'm like, no, it doesn't. You just wanted to show off.
Put it in there, you son of a bitch.
You sick fucks. Anyway, movie news.
So it's mostly Zack Snyder stuff, because there's some cool stuff on the internet rumblings.
There's some Marvel stuff going on too.
Really? I didn't hear
anything. The whole Moon Knight.
Oh yeah, I saw that. We'll start with that. Oscar Isaacs might be Moon Knight. I doubt it.
Well, it's either Oscar Isaac.
Also, boo, Moon Knight.
Yeah.
You just stole him from Batman. He's got a moon plane and moonerangs, and he dresses like a moon, and he dresses in white instead of black. He's Batman.
He's Batman.
Anyway.
But I think also I saw that they were considering David. What was it? From Hamilton. David Diggs. David Diggs.
I don't know who that is. Which one is he?
He
Washington? Is he
I
Jefferson?
think he plays in Washington. I think he plays Lafayette. He's also in a show that I can't find a way to talk about on here, but it's one of the best things I've seen this year so far. Is The Good Lord Bird.
I don't know what that is.
Oh my god! I'm gonna take a moment.
Okay, go ahead.
So The Good Lord Bird is a Showtime series. It's a mini series. I think it's only going to be like 6 episodes. It's based on a novel by I think Daniel I should look it up for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
The rumor bin of Moon Knight has also consisted of David Diggs, who plays Thomas Jefferson and Lafayette in Hamilton. He originated the roles for that.
Oh, okay.
And also Nick Kroll. Nope. Don't think that's going to happen.
Nick Kroll is going to be Moon Knight, or Nick Kroll was created Hamilton?
No, Nick Kroll was considered for Moon Knight.
No. Get out of here.
So quick diversion
I
to
don't
talk
hate
about.
Nick Kroll. I'm just saying.
Quick
It's
diversion.
like saying
to-
John Mulaney is going to play Ghost Rider. Get out of here.
Hey, don't. That's it. John Mulaney.
I love him, but
John
he's not
Mulaney
gonna-
should play Plastic Man.
That'd be good.
That'd be
I
all
heard James
right.
Franco was going to play him for a while. That there was a real movie that was happening in pre-production and everything, and now it's just like for nobody because nobody's asking for it. But he'd be good.
But David Diggs is in this series that I've been like, how can I get this on the podcast and talk about it? It's called The Good Lord Bird, and it's based on a novel by James McBride, and essentially it is about a young. It's set in about the late 1850s or so.
Yeah.
Set in Bleeding, Kansas, and a young
During Jim Crow.
yeah,
Not Jim Crow.
pre-Civil War.
The other, what's the name of the guy? John Brown.
It's about John Brown.
Yeah.
And Ethan
Why
Hawke.
did I say Jim Crow? John Brown. That's where that phrase comes from. Is I'll be a John Brown.
Yeah.
No. Anyway, go ahead.
Ethan Hawke plays John Brown, and the story about a young now African American, a former slave boy who, passing as a young girl, comes into the
Territory.
into the camp. His father gets murdered in a shootout, and it becomes involved with John Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And Ethan Hawke in this show is. I've mentioned it to a couple of people before. He's on an 11, maybe a 12 in terms of this performance. It's a sight to behold. Like, I'm serious. Like, it is a marvel of a performance he's doing. Like, I don't know how he got there. Like, because he's never not in character in this show. He's never not on it. His voice never cracks, and he's yelling this evangelical zealot lunatic who is completely on the right side of history. But he's not really the main character.
Yeah.
It's mostly about this kid they call Onion and his adventures, going from like trying to get away from this man or trying to get from one place to the other, and it's just this odyssey. It's all very fictitious. It's all very exaggerated. It's all
John
very
Brown, from what I remember, he wanted to kill Crow Indians. That's his thing, right? Or am I not mistaken? Or am I?
John Brown wanted to kill every slaver.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He had the religious devotion to say that slavery was a moral sin.
Who
and
am I thinking of?
I don't know who you're thinking of.
I can't remember.
Every other American. At that
No,
time.
maybe there's a different John something that I'm forgetting who like went on a crusade of killing, who went like to war with Crow Indians or whatever.
Yeah, this wasn't John Brown. John Brown had Native Americans in his posse. Mostly it's his sons. And he
wanted to destroy slavery.
Yes, destroy slavery, and he said the only way it can be done is through blood. This is a crusade by God. The enslaving of black people is a sin, and so that's what Bleeding Kansas was a lot of, is him going and murdering people in mass before he began to do the raid on Harper's Ferry in order to cause essentially an armed insurrection, but it failed and he was executed, and that sort of led to the Civil War. Long story short, It's mostly about them running around with all these characters, and Daveed Diggs plays
Frederick
Douglass.
Oh, is that right?
He plays Frederick Douglass. And there's a
Probably
great
young Frederick Douglass.
yes,
Yeah,
a young Frederick Douglass, and he has this great sequence where they're getting drunk and talking about like what's the plans that we should do, and it's this great bit where Ethan Hawke and Daveed Diggs are going back and forth, and he's like, Ethan Hawke's like, we should just kill them all, like this is terrible. And he's like, is it really your place to be telling a black man how our salvation should be done when you're a white man? And it's good. The show's great.
What's his answer to that? Yes.
Well, you just need to watch it because it's I can't recommend that show enough. It's a lot of fun. Wyatt Russell's in it, a bunch of other people in it. It's got a good sense of humor.
Wyatt Russell?
Yeah.
Kurt Russell's son?
Yeah.
Cool.
He plays like an officer that comes around to help them out every now and then.
I like that dude. He's been in a lot of stuff.
It's
He's an Overlord.
He is
That
an
J.J.
overlord.
Abrams movie.
Yeah, I remember him mostly from that Black Mirror episode Playtest.
Yeah, I remember that. Oh God.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
That was a good one. So long story short, Moon Knight. Check that show out. Check out the
Okay,
Lord Godbird. It's really good.
If this is a podcast, talk about stuff. If you want to talk about a show that you're into, it's fine. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
But so movie news. Yeah, Oscar Isaac might be playing Moon Knight.
I think it's I say that, but that's the Marvel universe.
I've only seen one person reporting it yet, and they're hit and miss.
It's
on
all
a lot of
very
stuff.
rumored.
Yeah.
Like it's almost just like it's the same with.
Also, he did Apocalypse. I don't know if he wants to do another one. He's like kind of left a bad taste in his mouth.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But he would get to. At first, I was like, oh, Oscar Isaac's too big a get. But this is also a franchise that has Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, and Mark Ruffalo. So it's not really that big.
Is it a movie or is it it sounds like a show?
It sounds kind of like more of like what would have been a Netflix sort of deal until Netflix dropped all their Marvel connections.
It would have worked so perfect with the Defenders. Anyway.
I don't understand Netflix's like model. It's so bizarre because they also apparently just canceled Manhunter. Or Mindhunter,
yeah,
which was very beloved, and a lot of people liked it and had this ongoing story. And apparently, they're just not doing it anymore.
I can understand why. What they should have done is taken Iron Fist and Luke Cage and stuck them together after their first seasons, because that's what they are. They're heroes for hire, the two best friends in comics.
I mean, they're going to keep doing. Some of the most beloved series on Netflix, they'll be like, yeah, we're canceling it. Deal with it.
Daredevil was nominated for several Emmys and has $1 million per episode budget, and it looks like it. And the wonderful Frank Millerness of it all, I love the Frank Miller Daredevil run is not just one of the best comic books you'll ever read, it's some of the best like fiction you'll ever read. It's great.
And that's like Daredevil.
Man Without Fear is one of them as well. And there's
it's not Daredevil Yellow and all that, because I'm thinking of Tim Sale.
No, you're thinking of it's the one where he has the black just bandana over his eyes and everything. And then eventually he does get the suit, and there's a really great way he gets the suit, and like bringing in John Bernthal as the Punisher, taking dialogue right from the Joe Quesada. I think there's a story where Daredevil and the Punisher square off called The Oath, where the Punisher ties him to a post or whatever, and he brings out like a man. He's a man who is like Daredevil thought was a good guy, but actually he's just a scummy criminal, and he betrayed a bunch of people, and he's like, I'm gonna shoot this guy in the head. And Daredevil, it's this great battle of morality where Daredevil is saying like
Daredevil can't break out and fight. He has to win over the Punisher with his wits, with his.
In the comic books more so. In the show, he does get free, and he just clocks John Bernthal, and then he goes down a staircase for like a 12-minute fight scene where he's fighting a bunch of bikers in a great single take action sequence. It's not a single take. There's 2 edits in it that I catch. One where he kicks the guy and the guy falls down the stairs and onto the camera, and there's a cut there.
That's a cut. Oh.
But it's a really, I know you don't really have much of an interest to watch those shows. If you do watch one, Daredevil is worth watching.
Well, I did watch the first 2 seasons of Daredevil. And
you did?
Yeah. I watched the first season of Daredevil.
Oh, they didn't. So that's in the second season when the Punisher comes around.
Yes, and, I did watch all that as well.
And they have this great stuff, and like anything from like it starts off as
Vincent D'Onofrio is
Kingpin.
Kingpin is a
he's great,
marvelous performance. Like and
he comes back in season 2 for like 2 episodes. He's still in jail, and then season 3 it's more him again.
I didn't get to season 3.
Yeah, and it starts off as
And
like
of course, I watched all of Jessica Jones. Like
yeah,
that.
I'm starting season 3 now. I just fell off of it, but I'm starting it back up again. But there's this great little conversation where like, and he's like, thieves and murderers and rapists, and like, the way you do it doesn't work. And we was like, what I do is like, it puts them down for good or whatever. And he goes, oh, please. And he goes, who hurt you? Who did you lose? And he was like, you think you're the first person to have, and it's this great it's great dialogue. And and Charlie Cox, who in a lot of stuff can be a very stilted actor.
He's very British when he needs to be very British because he is very British.
I'm not saying he's bad. I'm just saying he's like in like a movie like Stardust or in like
or him in Downton Abbey
or Theory of Everything. Like he's just a little rigid, but he shines in that show. Really great. And watching him go from like him and John Bernthal just squaring off and just having this great back and forth to after he rescues the Punisher later, and then John Bernthal has this 6-minute long scene where he talks about what it was like losing his daughter, and where he walked in, there's a hole where her face was supposed to be, where these people murdered her, and you see Matt Murdock's tears come down, which he's wearing a mask,
right?
He's in the Daredevil
thing with the white eyes and everything,
but he could have not done anything for right there. But Charlie Cox amps it up, and you see the tears come down.
He gets there, as they say. He gets there.
Yeah, and the scene goes on for too long, but it's perfect. Like where like a smarter director might have cut it, but a more indulgent one's like, you know what? Let it go for another 3 minutes.
We're gonna let John Bernthal get this moment.
Yeah, and it's really good, and like it's it's a fantastic show, and I would have loved to see Daredevil, linger over into the movies a little bit because that show is that good. Also, hire him as a lawyer to represent Peter Parker. That'd be a great little cameo. And watching him parlay with Moon Knight, it's the ultimate bittersweet ending to a great superhero show.
But we'll see if
Moon Knight might be Oscar Isaac.
Right. Again, I don't know. It depends on if they can get a guy like Oscar Isaac, if it's even.
I say that he wouldn't do it, but also like he did Star Wars and X-Men.
Star Wars is different. X-Men
he
was still on the rise at that point.
Yeah, but he's in Dune. He's not against genre IP and stuff.
But it has to be like he's an A-list.
Does it though? It's Star Wars. I mean, it's Star Wars is huge.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But it's not high finesse or something. It's not high art or whatever.
It's the highest
Dune is.
It's the highest though.
Yeah.
No one's gonna turn down Star Wars unless their agent's like, don't do this.
But he's also done smaller stuff, like Finding Llewellyn Davis or whatever. Like,
well, he started as just like
I think
the first thing I ever saw him in was Drive. He was in that Robin Hood movie with Russell Crowe.
Yeah, I feel like he might do it. If he does do it, that's cool casting. But also,
well, it recalls very similar to, and I can't recall her name. She's really great actress. Is the one that's being was rumored and had pretty much been like rumored to the point of going to be playing She-Hulk.
Who's that? What's the lady? Is it Katie? It's probably Katie Sackhoff, isn't it?
Nope. So originally, and this was back in September, the rumors were that Tatiana Maslany from Orphan Black was supposed to be the one that was going to be playing She-Hulk.
Oh.
Was supposed to be the one that was going to be playing Jennifer Walters.
Isn't she supposed to be his cousin? She's Hulk's cousin.
Yes, yeah. I think so. I think that's the situation at hand.
I know people like Orphan Black. I've never seen it, but
I've not seen it either.
Kudos for fan casts.
She's a really great actress. I know that. But then she came around to say, no, I don't really know anything. Or she's like, I'm not allowed to say anything.
This is the Armie Hammer Green Lantern. Every interview for like a year and a half, Armie Hammer was like, are you going to be Green Lantern? Because fans are freaking out over here. Every time you tweet something, they think you're Green Lantern. He's like, I have never had a conversation with anybody that can give me the job.
I'm very thankful that you all feel that way. So.
But speaking of Green Lantern, let's segue into a bunch of DC news. A couple of sources, people who I would say correctly called the Snyder Cut coming out on HBO Max rumor, have said there are already discussions to continue the story for a Justice League 2, as well as other potential spinoffs like a Ben Affleck Batman series. To which I say, yes, please.
That would be that'd be pretty something. That'd be something wild right there.
Also, I saw some funny memes about the Snyder Cut keeps adding more people to it. Of course, which we're getting to is Jared Leto's Joker is coming back. I am surprisingly okay with that, even though like I don't think he's very good in Suicide Squad, but I also recognize he's not in the movie enough to do much of anything anyway. Like, what performer could have 2 scenes and steal the movie? I don't know if that's possible, but
he certainly didn't steal that movie.
No, well, no one steals the movie.
So I saw this news. I knew we'd be talking about it.
Yeah.
I'm not enthusiastic about this, just because that performance is now just mired in so much. But then again, like, I'll give Leto the benefit of the doubt that a lot of his work has been cut. A lot of it has been cut, and that's both from Suicide Squad and apparently from, we knew at least this much from BVS that that there was the references to his Joker, like the post Death in the Family Robin suit and all that. So his shadow does not loom large, but it looms in Batman's psyche, at least. It's like, again, this is an older Batman.
And I would like to see Ben Affleck punch him in the face. It'd be really nice. It'd be great.
That'd be awesome.
I'd love to see a flashback where he punches the teeth out of his face, and that's where he got his grill from.
Well, can you imagine what in this movie is going to have that scene, or
there have been theories. It's up, so he's adding it, which means he's getting a chance to take his original 214-minute cut that we talked about. So he's getting to expand that to 4 hours, and they've given him a small budget to expand the story.
Right.
Which leads me to believe the only reason they would do that is they're going to continue this story. They're going to keep it moving in some direction.
Particularly with Ben
Ben
Affleck's Batman.
Yeah. Well, I think they're going to continue his Justice League arc and then maybe some spin-offs. And the Snyderverse will sort of live on HBO Max, which I say more power to him. If you're leaning into the multiverse, we can have 2 different storylines going at the same time. It would really suck to watch. Yeah, it would really suck to watch the theatrical DC movies knowing we're never going to see another Justice League, are we? That really sucks because they're my penultimate superhero team. More than the X-Men, more than the Avengers. They're the ones that I'm always like, I'd love to see a movie. And the idea that we get some sort of resolution to this, that's great. The theory is he's adding it. And I've heard a couple of different, these are rumors. Right. Don't take them as true. One is at the end of the Justice League, it's like in a post-creditsy way, Harley and Joker, after Suicide Squad, because he breaks her out at the end, are off committing a crime, and then Batman shows up to bust them, and instead of just Batman, like, a beat happens, and then the Justice League lands behind him. And like, oh, fuck. Like, that's a great little, that'd be great. I don't think Jared Leto would just want to come back for like, oh, this is a day of shooting.
A gag. No, Jared Leto wouldn't do that.
No.
He has no sense of fun in himself.
I would tip my hat to him for being a team player like that if he did. But no, I think it's going to have something to do with, I think that could still happen or whatever. I don't know. You have to get Margot Robbie to do that. Or is this, because again, like it all depends on where you place it. Has Harley left him by this point? Is
this taking place? It depends on where you want to put Birds of Prey and then where you're going to consider James Gunn's eventual Suicide Squad.
Some people say it's just a cameo in Arkham. Because the rumor is there might be a scene where Ben Affleck goes to Lex Luthor in Arkham to see, what did you learn when you went on that Kryptonian ship? When you said the Kryptonian ship has information from 100,000 different worlds. What did you learn? Who did you contact?
Right, so it's essentially it's essentially like a Hannibal Lecter.
As he walks by, there's the Joker in Arkham, which wouldn't make sense because he's captured again.
Right.
But again, like I imagine it's just going to be the one that makes the most sense is a post-credits involving Deathstroke on that, because you didn't see the Deathstroke scene, did you?
No, I did. The one with the him on the boat.
Yeah,
I saw that.
Okay,
scene.
yeah. So I think maybe they'll add to that because again, that's not the original end credit scene. Snyder shot a different one. It was on the boat, but they put a green screen behind Jesse Eisenberg and had him go, we need a league of our own. Right. Cut. Just put that in there, please. Put a mauve background and make it look like the boat or whatever. So I think what's going to happen is maybe Joker's on the boat too. And he's like, I'm putting together another league, but that wouldn't make sense either because that original credit scene, from what we know, and I'm pretty sure this is true, was supposed to be he hires Deathstroke to kill the Batman.
Yes.
But if you can tweak it, why not tweak it or whatever?
You can put other people. I mean, I have not seen Aquaman. Is Black Manta is done by the end of that movie.
No, he's still around.
You could have, well, I mean, this
fact-
is all speculative, but I mean, if you want to build up to, the Legion of Doom, Joker originally wasn't on the Legion of Doom because the Legion of Doom came from the cartoon series.
But the Legion of Doom, like every team, has a floating roster of interchangeable people.
Villains, yeah.
I think I don't know if that was ever his
I doubt they
original
could call
idea.
it the Legion of Doom. That's a little too campy.
I would love it if he leans into it.
Yeah.
Or it'll be like Doomsday. They don't call him Doomsday. Lex Luthor just says, your Doomsday, or whatever.
Right. Your Legion of Doomsday.
Yeah, or something like that. I think that if Snyder does do that, that would make, and it was really frustrating to me because at the end of the theatrical version of Justice League, I was still in my horrible PTSD of Phantom menacing that movie to try to like it as much as I could. And I've already said it's not that bad of a movie in retrospect now that I think about it. I've already done the episode. But at the end of Aquaman, I thought for sure the end credit scene would be Lex Luthor recruits Black Manta to the Legion.
It's kind of like an
But he
opposite.
doesn't.
It would kind of be an opposite version of we want you a part of the Avengers Initiative.
Yeah.
We want you a part of the Legion of Doom initiative. Like
Yeah.
every bad guy at the end that's still alive in all these movies gets brought in.
The memes on the internet are really hilarious about this movie. The fun ones, not the ones like Zack Snyder is responsible for COVID deaths or something, but like the ones where they're like they take Zack Snyder's Twitter handle and make a fake tweet where it's like I'd just like to tell everybody Godzilla is going to be joining Zack Snyder's Justice League, and it's Gareth Edwards, or like, and one is like the old gods are going to be joining, and it's a picture of Cthulhu or something.
Everybody's in, baby.
Yeah. And they're really cracking me up. But you're not stoked for the Joker thing. Why?
I don't care.
Just because the character didn't leave a mark on you.
Yeah, I mean, they have to win me over with it. Like, because at this point, you're really stacking the deck and something. Now, obviously, you want to show your cards. You want to say like, hey, I'm not just retweaking a movie that's essentially already made, as so many people have said.
Yeah,
Like, just like
if people are still saying
like,
that,
if he's
they're
getting
already
a big
behind.
allowance for a movie that's already been made, and he's just going to do some cuts. Like, that's stupid. And it's like, well, he's got to be like, no, this is a different movie, literally a different movie.
Yeah.
And by adding new things,
Well, if you should, if you're anywhere near like an earnest person who's genuinely curious, you don't have to love everything he's done, but if you're just curious about this movie and you've been following it a little bit, it's not the same movie. But I think the thing for me is, and also he tweeted out the picture of the clacker.
yeah,
or whatever.
the clacker.
Yeah, I guess that's what it's called.
clipboard.
So I think additional photography has officially started. The rumor is it's only about 2 to 3 weeks. Not a lot of time
That's a lot.
to shoot a lot. So
What's a lot of dialogue sequences?
I
things
think
like
it's
that.
probably going to be just connective stuff to make the stuff connect together or whatever. But I think that if he's adding this to the movie, it's got to be for a reason. I don't think it'll be a big thing, but I think it will be like a thing. I also don't think it's going to win over any new converts of his version of the Joker, a version that I am sort of indifferent to. But I think he's got it in him because he is an Oscar winner and he's a good actor. And
He is.
so, like, I don't think I've seen enough of him to even have a judgment, but I do like the idea of, and I do think that Joker does fit in that
Yes.
world.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he fits in that universe definitely. And again, if you can put it in there and be like, this just works, I'm like, yeah, no, it works. You just have to make it work for.
And I do think, not to throw shade at anybody, that he would work better under Snyder's direction than perhaps David Ayer. David Ayer also, since we're on this news, he tweeted, because we'll leave this behind now. David Ayer has also tweeted out that he went through a weird rigmarole when he saw the released version of Suicide Squad that came out. And he said that he went through like a weird dark time where he thought he failed and he had like a real tough time and he took a lot of shit on the internet. And then he just recently rewatched his cut, the original cut that is, I'm assuming, untarnished by WB and Jeff Johns or whatever. And it is quite good, he says. And he goes, so maybe one day you guys will get to see it. Wink, wink.
Yeah,
whatever.
wink, release the Suicide Squad. Well, that depends on how, if James Gunn's is as good and,
As we
exciting,
suspected.
it might, at that point, they might just be like, no.
I
We're
would,
just gonna now live in this canon.
I would be shocked. James Gunn is on board for it. He says like, hey, if you want to release his cut of the movie, that's fine.
Well, then this might be a godsend for David Ayer
Yeah.
to be able to be like, all right, we'll re-release it, a director's cut, because then you don't need the whole like release the Snyder cut. Just be like, oh, it's a director's cut,
Yeah.
unrated director's cut, and it's a different movie.
Yeah.
There doesn't have to be as much because there doesn't have to be any reshoots. Just release the movie.
Yeah, because his got all the way. He got all the way through both versions of the movie, not unlike
it
Snyder,
just-
who left halfway through post production or
Right.
whatever.
It got cut.
But I don't think that he's gonna win over any new converts. But it would be nice to see a scene with the Joker that means something, not just him, scaring Ike Barinholtz with his purring or whatever,
Or
just being
squirming around in his floor of knives and baby dolls.
Yeah,
like,
I'd love just like a scene of dialogue, an
Yeah.
extended scene of dialogue
if
where
you
he
can do a
says more than
scene where
3 words.
where he's in a room with Ben Affleck and they have a back and forth, that might change everything. That might really contextualize that character.
I hope so. I just, it's cool to see. I'm glad that, Snyder's leaning into it. If anything, people are like, he's gonna look back with hindsight and make changes to make it more like Marvel. No, he's doing like the opposite, which is exactly what I expect from him, frankly. Yeah, I have nothing more to add.
I have nothing more to add at the moment because this is more of a special episode, and so
Yeah. Speaking of which, do you want to get to the main event?
Yeah, let's open the cemetery gates, creak, and dig up a couple of classics, a couple of influential horror films.
So fill me in on which one you watched.
So I watched Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street,
Okay.
and not Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. Mostly due to a lot of people agreeing.
Wait, so Wes Craven didn't direct that?
No.
But did he do 2?
No. I think Wes Craven only did Dream Warriors. Let me see. I got all my stuff for Nightmare put up.
Yeah, that's fine.
So let me pull it up here.
And while you're doing that, I watched the original John Carpenter's Halloween, and I also went through the rigmarole of looking through all of the sequels that it had. I didn't watch all of them, but I looked at like all of them. And I was like, my God, there's a lot.
There's a lot to consider.
And I watched like 2 minutes of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, and I went, nope, and I turned it off.
Hot take. I like that movie.
Hot take. I know you do. I can't.
I skipped A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, which was
It's not Wes Craven.
no, this was directed by Jack Shoulder and written by David Chaskin.
So he has like nothing to do with his own sequel.
Yeah, it was funny because Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, came out in 1984, and due to its popularity, they were like, all right, we got to have a sequel. So they rushed out part 2 with a completely different cast, aside from Robert Englund playing Freddy, and we'll get to that. Dream Warriors is Wes Craven returning to the story. It was not directed by him, though.
He's a producer and a writer or something.
Yeah, that's Chuck Russell directed Nightmare 3 in '87, but the story was developed by Wes Craven.
Did the
and
cast
Bruce.
return?
Heather Langenkamp returns as Nancy from the first movie, so it's more of a direct sequel. Also, nothing in part 2
Matters.
matters.
Yeah.
It was just a quick way to make some money
It's the Terminator Dark Fate of
of the Elm Street
of
movies.
the Elm Street series.
This immediately follows, I think they say in the movie, about 6-7 years, so it's a little bit in the vague future after the events of Nightmare.
Yeah.
And it doubles down on kind of a little more about what one is capable of doing in the dream world against a creature like Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
But also what Freddy Krueger can do. We'll get to how part 3 is not great, but a lot of fun.
Okay. I've never seen it, so I mean, I'm interested just to hear what your
But you've
takes are.
seen Nightmare. The
Yeah, I've
original
seen
Nightmare.
Nightmare.
Okay.
It's been a while. Johnny Depp is in it, from what I remember.
It's Johnny Depp's first film role.
Yeah.
First major film role, at least.
So I watched John Carpenter's Halloween. Usually we'd say, what's our expectations? But I guess like one thing that we're going to come back to, I think, a lot in our reviews of these is legacy and like what these movies are.
Nightmare wouldn't be here without Halloween.
Yeah,
Like,
Halloween
even though it's a very different
of the 3 big ones, which is Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare. Isn't Halloween the first one?
first one.
Okay, yeah.
That's the first one.
It
It set everything off because
it
I think that
feels
was
like a
77, 76.
78.
78.
is
Okay, so
Halloween.
it was a little later. Which shows how quick that was so popular, and then just everything sort of like was like they went through this massive green lighting process. They're like, slasher, get him out there.
Yeah, it feels like the first one in good ways and in some maybe I don't want to say bad, but
Dated
some dated
ways.
ways. Yeah. Let's talk about yours first.
You sure?
Yeah.
Because you only did well. Okay, we'll get to Halloween after. Okay. So I watched Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
From 1984. At this time, Wes Craven was, much like Carpenter, was an established kind of, well, Carpenter was still kind of getting going. Like Halloween sort of set him off in the right way, I think.
He wrote it, directed it, produced it, and did the music.
Yes, he did the music.
That's
the
hard
iconic music.
It's hard to imagine what more he could have done. He didn't edit it.
Other than playing Mike Myers himself. Like, now, at this point, Wes Craven had some clout to him. He had done The Hills Have Eyes, The Last House on the Left, I think was the other one he did. So he kind of had a little bit of an edge in Hollywood now. Like, and I think around that time he also did at least not if in and around, he had done the movie Deadly Friend, which I mentioned it before, has a great head explosion.
Oh yeah, I remember.
That's about an evil cute little robot.
Kills Mama Fratelli.
Yes. Mama Fratelli gets her head blown up with a basketball.
I've never seen you so happy. I've given you birthday presents that didn't make you that happy.
Like, oh, this is great. Oh, look at that head go. So this one, I might as well give some backstory to this one because Freddy's a little different. In fact, you always look at the pantheon of the
You're talking about the first Nightmare.
Yes. Well, just the slasher characters, the rogues gallery of new Hollywood monsters. So of course you got Mike Myers, you got Jason Voorhees, you get I would consider Pinhead up there.
Sure.
And then you start getting some of the subsidiaries like Chucky and Leatherface and Candyman kind of counts in there. Essentially you get like you get all the creepy crawlers running around.
The 70s, 80s slasher villains.
Mm-hmm. You're all of which, and then you can get into some people like the Wishmaster and things like that, which is something else.
Yeah.
What makes Freddy so interesting and what went right about him and then what went so wrong about him reminds me a lot of the Hellraiser movies, particularly their sequels.
Yeah.
In that these are characters who don't have any reason to become slasher characters because they're so specifically set in their own rules, but they became too iconic for their own good.
I agree with that.
And so like later you get Pinhead and the Cenobites like murdering an entire like club full of people with like chains and like throwing around CDs that are cutting people's heads off, and it's like, this is stupid. That's not what these characters are. They don't represent this at all. This is
superpowers.
Yeah, well,
I mean, they're
super powerful, but they have no reason to do that because they're like, well, you didn't open the box. They don't just kill for fun. Like that, angels to some, demons to others. They're there to enact a kind of justice. The thing with the Nightmare on Elm Street is that I totally believe this could have been a one and done movie if it weren't for the fact that Freddy Krueger is so iconic, that Wes Craven created a character that has that look, and then Robert Englund put in that work as him, that they're like, we got to have more of this guy. And the problem is what happens to Freddy is he stops being scary. He should be one of the scariest guys out there, but all the later movies turn him into what Mike Myers and Jason Voorhees cannot be, which is a jackass. Like you gave him the ability to talk, and he is inherently so evil. Like there's not a redeemable thing about Freddy Krueger whatsoever. Like one could argue that like Halloween, we'll get to it, the main character is barely Mike Myers. It's mostly whoever Mike Myers is going after, or Dr. Loomis.
Yeah.
In the Jason movies, in Friday, Jason eventually becomes the main character because you're just there for him. You don't care about the rest of these dead meats.
Yeah.
But you almost feel a little sympathetic to him because he's usually killing people you don't like.
Yeah.
And he comes from a sympathetic background.
Whereas I can say when I was watching Halloween, one of the interesting things is I actually ended up in a very sort of middling kind of way. I actually liked a lot of the characters, and I did feel a good sense of dread. I will talk later about how stakes get raised in these movies as time goes on, and worse ways, even when they're good movies.
Yes.
Like the recent Halloween reboot where Jamie Lee Curtis is old and Sarah Connery.
Mhm.
I saw that in theaters. And while I liked it more than a lot of the sequels that came from this movie, I noticed you make Michael Myers into an unstoppable juggernaut, whereas in this movie, he is very stoppable.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where I like that first Rob Zombie Halloween.
Yeah. A lot of people give those movies shit. I think they're better than a lot of
I
the
think they're better
sequels.
than a lot of. I think they're better than
They're-
like The Curse of Michael Myers and all that. Like those just become essentially Jason Voorhees movies without Jason Voorhees.
The Rob Zombies movies maybe might make the critical mistake of, and we'll get back to yours in a second, of making him sympathetic
Mhm.
because he's like, oh, you see him as a kid
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
to a psychiatrist or whatever.
He's a victim of horrific Rob Zombie poverty and
Yeah.
abuse, like
But ultimately, I think the problems with those.
dirty 70s.
Yeah.
You know, just
But I think that also in the, I'll come back to this later. In the first Halloween movie, you see his face
Mhm.
in the movie near the end. He takes the mask off and he has like a weird Jason Voorhees, like slightly deformed face. Sarah's in here, everybody. And
Hello.
all I could think of was like, what?
Yeah.
You see his face? None of the other movies ever let you see his face.
yeah, his face is just.
He's
kinda
a
like-
man.
Yeah,
You
he's
could
a
ki-
man. He's
you
not.
could kill him, but even though Loomis shoots him 5 times and he vanishes,
and we'll
mysteriously.
get to what makes him that way because of the effects of Dr. Loomis.
I kind
But-
of like.
Reeling about Freddy real
Yeah,
quick.
go ahead.
There's not a single redeemable sympathetic thing about Freddy Krueger, and he knows it. And that becomes a problem later on.
He's kind of a lovable asshole.
Well, he shouldn't be lovable.
Not
is the
lovable,
problem?
But
he's
he loves himself.
Yeah.
I should say.
and a lot of it is just Robert Englund's so charming as an actor, and that he really just eventually you get to great parodies of him like Scary Terry from
Rick and Morty.
Rick and Morty, where the whole thing is
This is
he's
because you didn't give Morty good grades, bitch. That's my favorite one.
he just starts doing puns everywhere and everything, and it's like that is so divorced entirely from the original movie, where he is so menacing
Yeah.
and so evil and not funny. But and I'll get to it. So
Did you watch the Jackie Earl Haley remake?
no, but there's a fun connection between Jackie Earle Haley eventually becoming Freddy Krueger and this movie.
Oh, okay.
I'll talk about a little bit how it was made, how it came about.
Yeah.
So
Because you're a big Wes Craven fan.
I like Wes
You
Craven.
like the Scream
Love-
movies
well,
or the first
part 1 and 2,
two?
yeah, are great. Obviously, I like Freddy Krueger. I'm not a super Wes Craven fan, but I like most of the things that Wes Craven did,
You like-
particularly Scream.
Yeah, and you like Dead Friend or whatever, Friend Who's Dead, robot movie.
Oh, Deadly Friend.
Deadly Friend.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I think, and I've also seen one of his later works, and they're real strange. But like Cursed, his werewolf movie.
Oh, right.
Which was kind of taken away from him and
It was one of
reshot.
his last movies
Yeah,
too.
and it
Like he
became
kind of
like,
retired after that.
It became like that movie is.
Cursed.
It starts off like
the
it
kids
starts off kind of promising, and then it becomes the werewolf is literally like "fuck you," and it gives someone the finger, and I'm like, oh no! Like it becomes like the Freddy sequels,
Yeah.
in a very telling way, and I don't think it's because of him necessarily.
Well, one thing I really like about this movie, and one thing that kind of reminds me of Scream, is I forgot how vicious this movie is and how like violent it is. Like because a lot of, I mean, it gets really. So Wes Craven came up with this idea after reading about stories of people who had like post-traumatic stress situations related to warfare and other things that would go on, and it would eventually lead them to not sleep.
Yeah.
Or have like these horrible nightmares, and some men in particular would die in their sleep. And also, rumor has it a lot of it had to do with also reading about sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about sleep paralysis, the feeling that you in a dream, you're not in a dream, and usually there's some kind of horrible sense of being watched, or this horrible sense of even hallucinations
There's
related
a great
to
scene from The Haunting of Hill House that does with that.
that does that, yeah. And that's something that I've never dealt with it personally, thankfully, but it's something that fascinates me because a lot of people say that like, oh, when you see ghosts and things like that, it's usually just that REM sleep problem.
Yeah.
Because universally, everyone sees kind of the same thing.
A certain part of your brain is firing off neurons and stuff when you're coming out of REM sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And your body hasn't caught up yet, essentially.
And yet, people all over the world say they see like very specific shadow people, or they see very specific witches and old hags and things like that.
Which is kind of like Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah,
She's a shadowy bent neck lady.
Yeah, and it's kind of, so he kind of wanted to base the story around that, and then also kind of change it up a little bit. And
what do you think this movie gets right that like Freddy Krueger movies later get really wrong?
Well, they make him menacing. They make him actually scary. They make him something that is so powerful, except at the end where it's kind of nice. I see a lot of parallels with something like It a little bit.
They bully him to death.
She does bully him into death, quote unquote, because there's that.
You were the first person to tell me that they defeat Pennywise by bullying
by bullying him
like
to
a
death.
nerd, shoving him in a locker.
He's a stupid nerd clown.
Yeah.
You're not scary, you stupid nerd clown.
And the thing that he wants more is for someone to play with me.
Yeah, it's so dumb.
It's funny. It's funny though. I never saw it that way.
I mean, for one thing, I forgot how quick this movie gets going. Like, it's pretty short.
Yeah, mine is 90 minutes long, and it felt quite long.
Yeah,
because it takes a while.
Much like
for him to
talking
get
about
going.
American Werewolf, like they build things up. They don't build up a lot in Nightmare. The movie gets going. Like, you start in a dream sequence. Everything's very surreal and uncomfortable. The way they shoot the lighting is all very kind of blurry. And,
I remember that.
And you're not sure what's going on. And it vaguely hints to something. And then like 15, 20 minutes in, after you're introduced to the main characters, that girl is floating in above the bed, and her guts just get slashed open, and she's dead. And dude goes to jail like immediately. Like, the ball gets going fast, and then
The ball gets going not fast in mine.
no, well, that's kind of why a lot of people like that
To
one.
the point that it's like all of it's kind of bundled in the last 20 minutes.
Well, it's, you think about when you first see Michael Myers like by that hedgerow versus when you first see Freddy Krueger, coming out of the shadows, and there's the great sequence where Freddy's arms are extended out.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the first opening part, I thought I got the wrong movie because I forgot that it opens like in this letterbox, and you see him building, like forging the knives.
Did they touch on his history in the first movie, that he was like a child molester?
No, well, so Wes Craven originally was going to, and it's funny because I was just listening to a podcast about the Satanic Panic, and around that time, as I just discovered, because of a lot of moral panic and everything, he was originally going to make him that kind of character, but he's like, I didn't want to create a character like that because there was all this rampant accusations.
A bunch of Karens who were complaining about Dungeons and Dragons and Metallica albums.
Well, this was before that. This was when essentially, like, hey, a lot of affluent men in San Francisco were doing awful things to their children, and they got exposed finally. But he's like, I didn't want to make Freddy that character, so I made him, a murderer instead. So that is what takes time to get to, because we see Freddy Krueger the whole thing. Again, his arms stretched out, so he's scraping his arms across the walls, and then I think Heather Langenkamp playing Nancy is just like, oh God, and he's like, this is God. And so he barely says anything in the movie, and when he does, it's always very direct, very threatening, and very violent. And
later movies are not like that. He talks a lot, and it's a bunch of bullshit.
Oh, he can't shut Freddy up. Once you get to Freddy versus Jason, you're like, could you shut this guy up? He thinks every moment of those later movies, he's doing a tight five. Like, he's just doing comedy sets. He's like Malibu's most wanted, bitch. And he's like, and like, he shows up, like, there's like a video where they do the movie, the band Dokken does a song for it, and and he's afraid of Dokken, and like, it's Freddy waking up in a bed just like, who are those guys? And it's like, this character is now not scary.
He's become self-parody.
Exactly. Yeah. And that, I think, is, and again, a lot of that wasn't Wes Craven, because later Wes Craven would do the movie A New Nightmare.
Yeah.
which is
A
like
lot of people like that one.
yeah, I don't think it's that great. I think it's talking about movies that could have been great. It could have been great, but they don't go in far on it enough. And I think it's because. So, another thing about this, a little behind the scenes, is that for Bob Shea, who is the producer of this and the creator of New Line Cinema, obviously would go on to, give the world things like Scream and then later Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. I always forget Lord of the Rings was done
was
by
New
that
Line.
horror budget.
Yeah.
The horror budget owned by Warner Brothers Studio.
And New Line had put out a bunch of little indie B-rate horror movies, but Nightmare was a huge hit, and they call New Line the house that Freddy built. And so they are very precious to that character. And that's why New Nightmare, which is a movie about set on the set of a new Friday the 13th movie where Friday the 13th definitely happened. And Heather Langenkamp is a person in it, even though she has a fictitious husband and a fictitious son and all this going on. Robert Englund's in it. Wes Craven plays himself in it. And the whole thing is like, oh, actually, I'm trying to keep a demon at bay. And the more these sequels came around, he got angry, and now he's out in the real world, and it's like, yeah, this could have been good. It doesn't get there.
I guarantee you there's probably a point in that movie where you're like, you just went too meta for your own good.
I think that's what happened, because also they can't be that snotty about it, because they're also like, yeah, but Freddy's made us really rich. Even if these sequels suck, we still can't say too many bad things because this is the house that Freddy built.
I will admit there's going to be a point in this episode where I want to talk about the everyman horror versus the smug auteur horror and the weird dividing line that is there. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I think there's some of that comes from these movies, because some of these movies are good, but then people equate their love of Freddy Krueger, and now they watch Saw movies and a bunch of those and equate them as the same thing because of those sequels.
Yeah, because
there are
franchise
people
series.
who love horror. They love watching the bargain bin horror movies that you find everywhere, and they watch thousands of them a year or whatever. And they are connoisseurs of
the Fangoria type,
Yeah, and
which hey, no hate to those people. There are worse things you could do. I mean,
I think
there's a respect.
There is a place for the B movie horror,
and they recognize
one of my favorites is Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah,
and it is a great B horror movie and a great monster movie.
That's one of my favorite settings in a horror movie, in a horror series, is that very rusty Midwestern, like any. It's one of my favorite things to think about in horror is any abandoned looking shack you drive by in the middle of the county. What's going on in there?
Yeah,
I love that shit.
Yeah, and even not just the old Texas Chainsaw, which I like. I even like the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's a fun, bloody time.
My only problem with that one is,
it's
not rusty. It's a little too wet.
What do you mean?
Like, it's so dark and damp. And what got me when I was a kid, I'm tangenting a little bit, but
you're talking about the setting and the way everything looks.
Yes,
yeah, I agree with that.
What made when I was a kid and I ran across the original Texas Chainsaw is there's a scene I remember very explicitly where they're walking around outside of the barn and everything, and you hear this like sound, and he turns and the camera cuts to like this big nest of daddy long legs. And like I remember the movie just feeling so like it felt like it was 100 degrees, and like if you had touched any of the metal it'd burn your hand.
Yeah. And
when I was a kid, and this is kind of graphic, it was one of those kind of summers and I was out on the playground at elementary school.
Yeah.
This was the 90s, so like these jungle gyms are
death traps.
They're death traps.
The bodies of thousands are buried underneath them.
And the blood, including my own. I was running. I was going to jump off it.
Yeah.
Which wasn't that far of a jump. But my friend grabbed my shirt on the way down, and I skinned my back on this metal stairway. And I remember how it smelled.
It's hot.
That smell
hot,
of rust and everything. Yeah. And then when I saw Texas Chainsaw, the original Tobey Hooper one, I was like, that reminded me of that. So that's why I was like, that chainsaw that Leatherface has is a hot, rusty, nasty daylight horror kind of thing.
I agree with that.
And that's why the second one, even though it has some pretty good spots, it just didn't have the same atmosphere.
I agree with that. Also, it's directed by a guy who, aside from that, I don't like anything he's ever done. He did the Conan remake. He did the new Friday the 13th remake.
Yeah, he's more of like an action kind of guy.
No,
sorta,
it's
or-
mostly those
it's
horror
mostly those
movies
horror
and stuff.
things.
And like Marcus Nispel is his name.
Yeah, you can keep that Friday the 13th remake.
Yeah,
by the way.
there are a lot of them are just ugh. But
Speaking of remakes, real quick, Jackie Earle Haley was going with his buddy to the original auditions for the original Nightmare. That friend being Johnny Depp.
oh, is that true?
Mhm.
That's so cool.
He went with Jackie Earle Haley because Jackie Earle Haley at that point was a child actor. Like he had a career at that point. Like he was in the Bad News Bears. He was
hilarious.
just
And then he would go on to become Rorschach and
Yeah.
become known for that deep voice.
he would come on to be this like creepy bald guy, you know. But he originally was
When you
like
hear him talk, he
a
talks like
scruffy-
this. He has this kind of voice, and then you hear him as Rorschach. He's like, and I'll whisper, no.
I whisper. No. Well, it's not that bad, but you know, I'm not stuck in here with you. You're trapped in here with me.
It's my favorite badass line.
so good.
Me and Sarah watched Watchmen recently, and I told her like it's the best action movie line, not in an action movie.
Yeah.
None of you people seem to understand. I'm not stuck in here with you.
You're stuck in here with me.
And I was like, it's the equivalent of going up to the toughest guy in prison and punching him right in the jaw.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, it's
That's when he first
they
went to
captured him or
prison.
whatever.
and that's a line from the comic, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's not. Rorschach doesn't do that, but the fat therapist that he makes fun of
Mm-hmm.
tells it to another guy. Said, "Oh yeah, Rorschach was a child rapist, tried to beat him up, and Rorschach threw hot oil on him and beat the shit out of him." And I was
Right.
like, "That character is yeah,
He's something else.
he's something else." I always tell people you're not supposed to like him.
Right.
So if it's like Alan Moore says, Snyder says,
You're-
Lindelof says,
yeah.
you're not
You're
supposed
not
to
supposed
like
to
him.
agree
you
with
can
him.
find him interesting,
Mhm.
but
and
if you
can
find yourself
his determination honorable and admirable, but he's wrong.
yeah, you're supposed to be like, "Whoa, he's what a lunatic."
At
but-
worst, you're supposed to pity him.
yeah,
'cause I
I
think
find
you-
him as as sort of a tragic character
Yeah.
in a way, but there's a weird nobility to his death where he's the only one that kind of does the absolute right thing, which is nope, I'm gonna tell everybody. And the Dr. Manhattan's like, well, I have to kill you then.
Yeah, it's like because that's something
But
things have
as Alan Moore said, if you find yourself in, I feel like I'm Rorschach. He was like, please get away from me.
Yeah,
I hate
that's
you.
like you're feeling like you're Tyler Durden.
You're not
or-
supposed to like.
You're
him.
not supposed to like Tyler Durden.
Yeah.
And another movie very similar to that is Whiplash, where when that movie came out, some people are like, "Ooh, this movie's very inspirational." I'm like, "No, it ain't. It better not be," because it's essentially just like, "Oh, my abusive mentor is fine as long as we both get a moment of satisfaction."
Or as long as we like it's what we just said about like being a douchebag auteur director.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay if your movie's good, but if your movie sucks, everyone says like you're just an asshole.
Yeah.
Like it's not necessary. You can achieve greatness without abusing someone to get there. or
Yeah,
whatever.
and then you're just kind of like both these characters in this movie are going to like have miserable lives and die early. So
Yeah. What do you love about
this
this movie?
Well, I like that it just feels the creativity with the special effects and like how dreamy it is and how uncomfortable you are.
I remember that dream effect.
Yeah,
The
it's
hazy
very
looking
hazy.
filter.
You
can buy a filter for your camera that does that because of that movie.
David Lynch does that a lot too, to give you this kind of vibe that you're like you're uncertain what's real, like you don't know really where the lines blur, and also because the way everyone performs, like even up to guys like John Saxon, who's this great B actor who's in this. He plays the sheriff dad.
Yeah, I remember.
John Saxon's great. He's in a lot of he was a horror standby for the longest time. Passed away pretty recently. Everyone's just kind of not on it, not on the level. Like the mother, Harry Langham's mother, is this alcoholic who's always kind of distant, and her dad's this rugged cop, and her friends are vanishing. It's only like a cast of 4 people, 4 dead meats, and as they affectionately get called, and Johnny Depp is in it a lot longer than I thought he was. Like,
Do you want to take? We'll save it for the end, but I'd like to talk about our favorite scares from this movie. There's the one with the arms in the bed. Still gets me.
oh yeah,
When he's lying on the bed and the arms just take him into the bed, into the pit of nothingness. I'm like,
Or-
that is scary.
one of my coworkers said that him coming out of Freddy's face coming through the wall, because essentially they just put like cellophane there
And he just pokes
and
his
just
face
pokes
through it.
Again, like the gore effects in it are really intense. Like he at one point like slices his guts open and just like green guts come out, and he's just like, check it out. Look at that. Or he pops his hand off, like just slices his hand off, and he's kind of like wagging his eyebrows that aren't there because he's got a burned face, and he's just like, pretty neat, huh? But it's always with this idea that, unlike the later movies where it's played for laughs, he thinks it's funny because it's so awful.
Yeah.
Because he exists for nothing but pain.
I agree with that. I agree, like, especially those later movies, he talks too much to be menacing.
Well, you're at that point, you shouldn't be there rooting for Freddy.
Which I don't have the problem with Halloween, is he doesn't talk at all.
No.
But I did find myself, I guess we can transfer to my movie now if you want.
I got just two little other things to bring up.
Yeah, that's fine. I found myself wishing for a little bit of gore in
Yeah.
that movie because it is quite
tame in
it's
comparison.
quite tame. Well, the scary parts are not the violent parts in a way. Go ahead.
In terms of like what makes this one scary is by the end of the movie, and that's why watching part 3 is so strange, because part 3 is a absolute definite sequel. Essentially, part 3 is set in a troubled youth home, a mental hospital, and Freddy's now hunting after these kids.
Yeah.
And Langenkamp shows up, and she's just like, "Hey, you are all very special, and I know who's coming after you. It's Freddy Krueger, and you are all like the sons and daughters of those left on Elm Street, and I'm going to teach you how to use your powers." Because one of the girls is a psychic, in order to fight against Freddy. And so, like, you get some pretty fun stuff later in the movie. Like, one kid loves D&D, so he becomes a wizard, and he's like shooting like lightning bolts at Freddy, and Freddy kills that kid pretty fast. But
That's hilarious.
like,
what's
it's more
what's the
triumphant.
joke from Inception? Dare to dream a little bit bigger, darling. And
Yeah,
Tom Hardy has a grenade launcher.
Well, that's
Turn
also-
yourself into like a giant.
Yeah, turn yourself into like
Even other
turn yourself into RoboCop.
Even another D&D character like a Solar, a holy angel that like is like strength rolls are 28 or something, like they're just, you can't beat him like or whatever.
But it's like the little things like, oh, I can do a backflip, and that ends up paying off. Like, and also they retcon a thing where they're like, there's this one professor, there's one doctor who's like helping along with them, and they're like, what's happened is they advance on the lore of Freddy. He runs into what turns out to be the ghost of this nun who's like, a long time ago, a woman, Mary Krueger or whatever, she got left at the convent here years ago, and the asylum patients got free and raped her and all that, and so Freddy was born, and it's the idea of he was born the bastard of like 100 maniacs. And that's kind of like, that was the lore about him, is that he was born wrong, and became wrong. And then that doubles back to who he was originally, which is, well, he was a murderer who killed a bunch of children, and because of very vague legal reasons, they couldn't keep him, and so they just formed a posse and burned him to death.
Yeah, I remember that. They were just like, he got out of the court somehow. They didn't have enough evidence of his bloody knife hand.
Yeah, they didn't have enough evidence. But what I find so interesting about the original is like, that still feels very dreamlike. Like, it's not talked about enough. It's just
like a legend.
Yeah.
Which I think works
but
better.
The legend still directly affects these people, because Heather Langenkamp, Nancy's mother, is like, and I kept his claws right here. He's dead. Because she's trying to say, like, look, Freddy can't be here. Freddy's dead. We killed him. Mama watched him die. Like,
that's Nancy's mom.
Mother. Yeah. So she has the gloves
I also like
in the furnace downstairs in their freaking house.
I also like that. I like the fact that there's like the adults and it gets worse as the movies go on. But like for those movies, I remember I like the fact that the adults are like, look, I know exactly who you're talking about. And that's sort of like our unspoken shame in our town is we hunted this man down because he's evil. And
Right.
We killed him. And we sort of took the pact together. I like an unspoken.
Well, it's like
legend.
werewolves, like American Werewolf. The whole village knows something, but the others can't know. But they use it as like, there's no way Freddy can come back. And by the end of the movie, in the first one, the movie ends still in a dream sequence. Like, the one thing Nancy realizes is like, oh, I just have to pretend he's not real. And that defeats Freddy. She's like, you're shit. You don't exist. I don't have to believe in you. And he can't hurt her anymore.
Which is the one where you have to drag him into the real world? Does that ever
That was
happen?
this one.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because she's able to pull his hat out and everything. Because the whole thing is they got to stay awake and all that. Of course, Johnny Depp gets turned into a giant fountain of blood, and it's insane and awesome.
Yeah.
But eventually the movie ends like with her walking out the door and it's daylight. You could see the dream. And I imagine if you were there, you would be like in the movie theaters, like, oh, this isn't over. Because I remember the scene that scared me the most is her mother sitting by the door, hilariously has a thing where it's like, I don't want to drink anymore. I don't think I ever will again. And it's just like this weird, like, okay. And she gets in the car with her friends who are all alive.
I know what you're talking about.
And
He yanks her back into the house.
Yeah, through the little hole, and it's clearly like a doll of a person just goes like and flies out. That scared the crap out of me because it was so unhuman. Like it just felt so inhuman. Like what makes this movie work so well is that when it gets so distorted and you're not sure what's true, the movie feels like it's lying to you, and you're not sure what you can trust and who you can trust because
that would become like a meme later. It's like it works great in that movie. Later movies, they don't play around with the dream stuff as well as they do in that movie.
Well,
and I guess I haven't seen Dream Warriors, but from what you're telling me, it sounds cool. It's like that is the only way you'd be able to fight back is like you have to fight on his territory.
Well, and also like in Dream Warrior is when it starts getting vague on one thing about Freddy's power is how much effect can he have on you in the real world? Because like you know,
if he kills you in your dream,
but you're being assaulted in real time because like you know when the police show up to see what happened to Johnny Depp, they're like there's nothing left, so they all have to be like what happened to him? like you don't just like get turned into a gusher in the dream and then you're just like dead of a heart attack on a bed.
Yeah,
like he's able to cause physical damage to you, but you can cause physical damage to him if you bring him in, which is why the last thing I want to say about it is I forgot the end of the movie turns into Home Alone, because Heather sets her whole house up to be a Home Alone death trap, and all of a sudden Freddy is just like tripping over wires. He's like, oh God, and just like falling over, and it's kind of like,
does he say, "Oh God"?
No, but he's very frustrated, and all of a sudden it becomes very funny. And I think that's the point: is like this purely menacing character now can be ridiculed and defeated, kind of like bullied by bullying Pennywise.
I think it's supposed to flip it.
Yeah.
Now he's always tormenting people. Now he has to feel terrified and frustrated or whatever.
Yeah,
Maybe not
but then it twists at the end where it's like, oh, he won, which is why like when you get to part 3, it's like, oh, I guess he didn't, because Heather's like, yeah, my dad's now a drunk, and my mother did die in her dreams from Freddy, because it seems like that happens, but we're not sure.
So we never get the answer. Like, did he actually kill her mother, or we don't know?
Well, they just kind of like yeah, sure, he did. Yeah, he did.
Okay.
Yeah, no, just why not? The only sequence you get of it is like Freddy jumps on her mother when she's in the bed, and her and John Saxon run up there to save him. And there's like a fire, and then you just see this like burnt skeleton of her mother like sinking into the bed, and they're like, "Oh no!" And it's like, well, I guess that's her dying. But they never they don't really put a point on it until part 3, where they're just like, yes, that's what happened. And then at the end of part 3, that kind of wraps everything up, because they put Freddy to rest. They bury his bones, and they go find his bones. Apparently they just buried them in a car lot, like a abandoned car lot somewhere at a dump. And so they were able to get his bones, which at one point his bones come to life in a hilarious.
How would you find his bones though?
Oh, well, they had John Saxon with them. This doctor was like found John Saxon in a bar and was like, hey, you know where Freddy is? He's like, yeah, I guess I do. And they go dig him up, and he turns into Jason of the Argonaut skeleton, starts punching them. It's kind of funny. But eventually they bury his bones and with a crucifix and everything, and they destroy Freddy. It seems like that's how the movie should end. It ends very much like we did it. That's why everything else past that is kind of like we're just trying to make money off this character.
Yeah.
I feel like this movie was very, very effective when it came out, because it is very creepy. And for a lot of people, they've never seen anything like this before, like that kind of movie. But
I remember in Freddy versus Jason, they bring an idea that I like, which is the best way to get rid of Freddy is to like scrub his name from the history.
Yeah, well,
so
the whole thing is,
if you can't remember him, you can't be afraid of him.
Right, and that's newer stuff like, oh, the kids forgot about me, and that's why I have to have Jason go and kill kids again so I can become powerful.
Yeah, that's dumb. But yeah. the I like the idea of that.
Also, the dumb idea that
would have been a better way to bring him back. Is like after you've buried him with the crucifix, maybe his kind of evil can't be contained by that, because what he feeds off of is he lives in your dreams.
Well, that's kind of what they do in the later
into your
ones.
Subconscious, but you got to bring it to maybe like a kid reads an old newspaper article about this guy and he can't find anything about him, and that brings it back. Could have fixed some of the not good sequels that or whatever that came after or whatever.
He's a character that's so fascinating and so interesting and so scary just in nature. It's just I think that they created a character that was so iconic with the hat and the sweater and the glove that look transcended his story. And they're like, well, I don't care what Freddy Krueger is. He can get in your dreams and he can kill you and he can like turn you into a slug monster and make fun of you and then cut your head off.
Yeah.
And that sort of neuters the scariness of the character to where he just becomes he becomes almost like Chucky or the Leprechaun in terms of becoming a comedy horror character.
Yeah. I would argue that the first movie, he's really scary.
Yeah,
but it's also like it's not scary in the way of like nearly in the way of like a slasher movie. And then he kind of gets degraded. I feel like at this point Freddy Krueger gets watered down every time you dip into him.
Well, I think
there's less of the good stuff, the essence of it left.
And I think he fits Wes Craven's sort of nature is that like his villains, his movies are grisly and they're violent. And like you always forget like watching Scream that at the beginning of that movie when what's her name gets gutted,
Drew Barrymore?
I think Drew Barrymore gets gutted at the beginning. It's gruesome. Like it's really gnarly. And the thing is like Freddy's a grisly character. Like he's very irreverent. He's very perverse. He's very just very much like a sick man. But he's very aware of what he does and he loves it. And that's what makes him so despicable and so evil. But that also leads to him becoming so silly later is that he's dead and loving it, and that's a problem. But that's all I got to really say about Nightmare. I keep talking more about that character, but
let's talk about Halloween.
Let's talk about Halloween, man. Let's talk about the masterpiece.
I think this movie is mostly good, and it was in elements hard to watch because I think people are embarrassed about Michael Myers, or I think that like not like an audience member, people like I said, the people that love the Fangoria types, they love watching all of these sequels, and they love
because I watched a lot of these sequels growing up because they were on HBO and TV a bunch. So most of my knowledge of Michael Myers came before I saw the original Halloween.
Yeah, and I feel like if you juxtapose this with like the last two Halloween movies, the level of violence, the disparity between them it's like night and day. Especially like the new one does a better job at also not getting too carried away with it. Whereas some of the Rob Zombie ones or whatever, or some of the sequels, the kills get too creative and gruesome for their own good.
Well, he almost, like I said, he becomes essentially irreplaceable. He becomes like essentially Jason. Like there's no difference between the two of them because they're both silent, masked killers.
But they almost be like, but he has super strength or whatever. Whereas he doesn't in this movie.
He's a guy.
He's just a man.
He's a pale-faced young man with these eyes,
like
black eyes, the devil's eyes,
staring at the wall, through the wall, looking for a moment. This moment, right here. Like that's good stuff. But
I mean, this is what separates this movie. Is a lot of it is Donald Pleasance.
Yeah,
like,
I remember
and
Jamie Lee
Curtis.
I remember watching these like the sequel and stuff, and like there's a part where he kills a guy with a chain. There's a part where like these two news reporters who went to try to interview him at this prison where he is kept in a square in the center of the yard.
Is this in the new one?
Yes.
Yeah, where he's got like chains on both sides of him.
Yeah,
and he's a great shot.
It is. It's cool, and they bring
Gordon Green, right? Who directed this new one?
I think so.
Halloween Return.
Just Halloween.
Halloween, because the next one's going to be like Halloween Kills, and then
or something like that. And he, they want to get a rise out of him, so they bring his mask to see what it does. You don't see his face, but you see like sort of the side of his face.
He's got like long hair.
By the way, Jason, see, I did it myself. Michael Myers is 63 years old by that point. So at some point, I'm gonna be like, it's not scary anymore. His bones would be like nothingness.
Yeah,
but whatever.
I mean, there's some pretty
tough
looking. There's some pretty tough. I mean, look at professional wrestling. There's some pretty tough 60-something-year-old guys. But then we need to see Mike Myers like at the yard gym, just like hitting iron every day.
We would. But we're just supposed to believe. And this is the part that I don't like, is I like when they lean into the fact that he's a man. In that movie, he gets his 2 fingers shot off by a shotgun. I was also like, at that close of the range, I was like, your hand would be gone. But, and I know I'm talking more about the sequel than I am the original, but I'll circle
Well,
back
everything's
here in
in
a second.
context.
And they bring his mask to him to see if it does anything. It's almost like he's afraid of the mask, and then they go, "Oh, it didn't do anything." So they drive away, and eventually he meets them again at like a gas station bathroom, and he kills the male one, and the girl is in the stall, like going to the bathroom, whatever, and he just drops his teeth over the thing, and I was like, Michael Myers wouldn't do that. Michael Myers wouldn't care enough to be like, "This is what I did to your boyfriend," or whatever.
Right.
It's vindictive and silly. He doesn't care.
Because it seems like Michael Myers has only one. Because we think a lot about what are the goals of these guys, these creatures, whenever they come around.
His goal
is
to kill
his
Jamie Lee
sister.
Curtis.
Yeah, it's to kill.
Well, he killed his sister. I guess it would be his baby sister.
Right.
Is the way they've set it up now.
Who is what's
Jamie Lee Curtis.
well? What's her character? It's
Laurie.
Laurie Strode,
Yeah.
who is Laurie Myers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the part of me that I never understood is like getting more creative with the deaths makes him less scary in a way. I mean, the gore is supposed to give you some sort of elementary sense of like scare or like or at least something to entertain you in a way. But like in this movie, if I'm not mistaken, he kills one person by strangling them. He kills another guy by picking him up and stabbing him through the chest once,
Right.
where he stays hooked. Also, the
Well,
knife's not big enough to do that. But
right.
like,
But he kills him and kind of like tilts his head, like sort of looks it over, kind of like, huh.
yeah, and then he kills the other one by strangling them with the telephone cord, and then that's it. He kills 3 people.
Yeah.
There's very little blood, and he is decommissioned by a knitting needle to his neck.
To his neck, yeah.
And I know it sounds
he
like
gets something in his eye too. He gets that
Later.
wire hanger in the eye.
Yeah,
when he's-
later.
'cause-
But the first time she does a knitting needle to his neck, and he's out. And there's a point in this movie where this is the part that gets dated or that makes it harder to enjoy, because I will get to some good things later. But all I could think of is pick up that knife and stab him.
Yeah.
Stab him in the heart.
Finish him off.
Yeah. And I think this movie is a great first step that they never knew what to do after with it.
Well, do you think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it was sort of the first one, and it's I guess looking at the time period, like as was brought up when I was listening to that thing about the Satanic Panic, like this is also post a lot of the new serial killers. Like serial killers were in the news and like things like that, and so. You know, the idea of someone spree killing 3 people is like, whoa, my God. Versus, you know, later on.
A guy who hunts in your dreams and turns you into a puddle of blood and
right.
stuff. Like,
or
very
Jason,
tame.
who's like slaughters an entire camp counselor unit. Like,
I think that the violence is never scary. The thing that I find the most scary is that he takes his time, and it seems he takes his time because John Carpenter says so. Because I read some bad reviews of this movie. It's at a 97%. It's a pretty universally loved horror movie. One of the bad reviews, and all the new reviews about it from people like new critics who just got around to reviewing it or whatever, they're all reverent of its legacy status, but the old reviews are interesting to read because one of them was like, "This movie takes so long to get going. At some point, I just wish you would start killing kids at this point." Like, I never wished for a child to die so much. It was one of them or something like that. Like, come on, man, let's get to it. I did feel a lot of that, but I also appreciated just him staring at you and how creepy that could be to someone alone in a house. I don't know if you live in a house or an apartment. Imagine like looking out your window and just seeing a guy staring at you, even if it's a guy just looks like you and is your size, no mask or anything. But
just anyone who's making eye contact with you and breaks that threshold of safety, you're like,
yeah. Which brings me to my. I think that there's a legal amount of time you should be allowed to wait before you're allowed to start like punching somebody. Like if you open a door, like one of my podcasts says, if you open a door and there's a guy in a clown mask there in front of you, I think you have about 2.5 seconds before you're legally allowed to beat the shit out of this guy.
If they don't immediately say, "Let me explain why I'm here," I'm here for a candygram.
But like when he's sitting around like the bushes, or there's a part where they think he's in a car and they think he's one of their male classmates, and and one of her friends shouts something at him, and his car, which is like 20 yards away, just stops. for a second.
Mhm.
That is kind of scary.
Well-
It is kind of scary to even like in a routine traffic like stop where you yell at you yell at someone in front of you or whatever,
And they just
and you think like, oh shit, is this about to go down? Like
about to.
and that's the point where I access crazy Rob. Like, all right, if he gets out, you have to act more crazy than he is.
Yeah.
But
Scream louder.
yeah, but I also when looking at this movie, I'm very cognizant of the legacy and stuff. And when I look at this movie, I also think even John Carpenter, kind of like the first Star Wars, didn't quite know what he had, and he kind of drew. And let me be very clear. I think John Carpenter has made better movies than this.
I agree.
I think The
I agree.
Thing is a better horror movie than
Yeah.
this. It's way gorier. It's
It's
better
a special effects masterpiece.
It's better performances, the music, the atmosphere, the setting. It's all better.
Yeah.
I'll go to my grave saying that. That being said, I think he caught lightning in a bottle, but I also think Michael Myers wouldn't care if someone called him a dickhead.
Right.
He wouldn't stop his car to be scary.
Hey, dickhead.
I think the scariest parts is when he's not performing
Mm-hmm.
or when he's
When
not.
he's just being.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
he's just being. I think later movies get that more right, but then they also do the thing with the teeth or
Right.
something. They have to
Where
gross you out or something.
Yeah, because it's like because of the legacy of what Halloween created, escalation
And its
happened.
sequels, yeah.
So now, like, you go through a list of all things Jason Voorhees has done to people, and it's like, Michael Myers can't hold up to it. But also, it's because like we all accept that Jason Voorhees is a supernatural entity.
But Michael Myers is just a man, which I
Right.
go back to.
Depending on which movies, though, in some movies he's not. Some movies they're like, is
Sam
he the
Hain
embodiment
curse
of
something?
Yeah,
Yeah, like,
is he Samhain? Is he is he the embodiment of evil? And it's like, no,
dumb. Make him a
Dr.
man.
Loomis is like Captain Ahab. He has inflated this man into something more than it is because it has psychologically affected him to the point that he's become a madman.
Yeah, I agree
And
with
that a lot of that is, especially in the later movies, Donald Pleasence's performances before he passed away or just was like done with doing these movies. But all three of those characters, Laurie Strode, Dr. Loomis, and Mike Myers all have their own legacy because they continue. That's why Jamie Lee Curtis is still in this franchise, even though like Halloween Resurrection, she dies. But they've ignored all those movies because they're like, no, it was only Halloween 1. Skirt, the new Halloween.
I think that
Isn't that how it goes now?
I think it's 1 and 2. And
1
then
and
that,
2,
but
and then they jump over all the ones where Michael
See,
Myers.
they bleed together. Is what I'm saying.
Well, then like Michael Myers detours into like the countryside and goes after his like niece.
yeah.
And then it's just that's eventually it becomes a
And then
it
the
becomes a
Rob
Jason
Zombie, the
movie.
Rob Zombie ones are just kind of a remake
They're
of
just
1
remakes.
and 2.
Yeah, they're just remakes. They're
And,
just gnarlier remakes
And I think that
that are fine on their own, in my opinion.
yeah, I think they're fine.
I think there's some of his better like stuff, except for 2. Halloween 2 is bad,
I
but
haven't
Halloween
seen,
1 is
I haven't seen
pretty
like
solid.
Lords of Salem or anything like that in a while, so I couldn't tell you. I think that the stuff where he's doing his best is just like eerie psychological stuff. I wonder if John Carpenter had this idea now, how he would make the movie.
That's a very
That's the thing that intrigues me is if he would have looked at horror movies. I think he would not like, and I'm sure he doesn't like, a lot of the sequels to this movie.
no, can't imagine.
Yeah. I mean, he's such a good horror director that I imagine he would look at something like Resurrection or
H2O
or
or
just be like,
Curse of Michael Myers.
I think he would
and-
just like shake his head, like you've gotten away. Like the fact that he's just a driven man. We even see him like earlier in the movie in a hospital
gown.
or gown or whatever, where he jumped. By the way, that was hilarious. It was the most like undramatic stealing of a car I've ever seen. Where he jumps on top of the car, and the woman rolls down the window and is like, "What?" Outside of a lunatic asylum or whatever. I was like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, just drive faster.
drive around in circles till he falls off. Again, and I think
It was almost like you would say this Michael Myers has more in common with like Anton Chigurh than he does Jason Voorhees.
yes, and I think that's more interesting. And I think the further away from that you get, I think if John Carpenter was alive, is he dead?
No, he's still alive.
Okay, if
He just doesn't do film anymore. He's retired.
I think
he
if
does.
he-
He goes around and plays his scores. Like he plays his soundtracks.
oh, that's cool.
He's an instrumentalist now. He does concerts and things.
I think if John Carpenter had made
Wes Craven died.
Halloween in like 2006,
Mhm.
he would have made a different type of movie. I think that I'm not one for nostalgia, so some of it is lost on me. I don't have a nostalgia for the Halloween music. And every time you look out the window and see Michael Myers, you hear that ding,
Yeah, that
thing.
ding, ding.
Yeah, and I was just like, all right, like some of it just is a little wasted on me. But I think the parts where it does well is like there is an inhuman drive to him that I really liked as a character.
And it's a drive
but it
you
also,
don't understand because it's so set into him. Like I have to finish, because the whole lore behind him is like he killed his family, and Laurie's the one that got away. He's
Essentially.
like, I gotta finish it. You know.
I feel like as well, like I appreciate that drive, but the drive only happens when a character does something really stupid. Like there's a part where Laurie locks the kids in another room and then leads him into this other room, and she opens the windows to make it look like she got out and
I
then
remember
goes
that,
to the closet. All I could think of was go out of the windows. Michael Myers can't sneak up on you
Right.
if he's in front of you the whole time.
Because that becomes sort of the thing about him and Jason in particular is they both just seem to have teleportation abilities.
Yeah, and there's a
Jason
part,
more so, but
and that's another thing I appreciated about this is that Michael Myers doesn't do subtlety. He makes a beeline when he comes out of the house after she gets away from the house across the street. Where
Yeah.
her friend is killed at. He just walks towards her,
And
He
that's
doesn't
creepy,
He
like,
doesn't
'cause he just-
run. He doesn't sprint. He just walks. That is scary.
he has confidence enough in his ability to get you that
But
he's
the
not
pragmatist in me goes, if you can see him, he can't kill you. So
because he's not a ghost.
keep a car in between him and you and call the police and just wait. Like part of me goes to and like look, you put someone in a terrible situation like that, you're not going to think necessarily rationally, but I think that there is a certain degree of me where when he's on the ground, stab him in the neck. When you open the windows, go out the window and make him follow you. And this is something that I think I hate about these movies, especially like the Friday the 13th new movies. The new Halloween movie does it a lot, which I don't like, is in order to show you that he is in the room or something in Jamie Lee Curtis's souped up doomsday house, which has trap doors that can be launched to seal the rooms off.
Right.
Very smart. But after she's cleared the whole downstairs, okay, now you know he's upstairs. Why is he here, Laurie? Well, he's here to kill you. He has to come downstairs.
Right.
Wait at the bottom of the stairs.
Or
with a
he's just going to be
shotgun
up there all day, all
Yeah.
night.
and wait till and call the police or whatever. And he like, for a guy who's been in an insane asylum since he was 6, he knows how to drive a car and to cut the power from your house.
Yeah, he's a bit of an electrician.
Yeah,
He knows
I dislike some of these things because they strain credulity. I'd like for him to just be like, I don't know what that is, but I know how to kill people. Like
Yeah.
that's to me is more scary.
Well, I wonder how
Oh,
much
I'm
they
sorry.
fear.
One more thing is,
Yeah.
so as he's in the house, you hear him just stomping around, and it's amazing how a giant hulking 7-foot tall man. By the way, in the original movie, not that big, not that scary.
Right.
He's about my height, maybe shorter.
I'd say he's at least. Well, how tall are you? 6.
I'm like 5'11".
We're about the same height. We're about 5'11".
And Jamie Lee Curtis is shorter than me, I'm pretty sure, which I think he's about her size.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, and now when
Again,
you see
a lot
him,
of
he's
it is
9
just-
feet tall
yeah.
and he's built like a brick shit house.
Again, a lot of it is just he's wearing a big old jumpsuit, like,
too.
and that jumpsuit, hides that Dickies jumpsuit
it
hides
does.
a lot of scrawniness that he may have.
It does. But in these new movies, for a guy who's that big, he can just vanish. Like it happens in the.
He
like,
rolled a good
stomps,
stealth.
He stomps around to let you know he's there and let you know he's real close and he's looking around for you. Except when he just vanishes into thin air. Also, Laurie has a house or has a room of like mannequins and dummies.
Oh, in the new one, in
Yeah.
the old one,
Why?
yeah.
Why? It's not even
There
explained.
were a lot of mannequins back in the 70s.
It just like lets him so he can hide in plain sight, and then he jumps out at you.
Well, there's the whole gag of like the couple that are trying to they're trying to bone, and he comes in with his glasses, wearing the sheet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good one.
that's a good one.
I like that.
Yeah,
He just stares. Part of me likes the fact that he's not just. It seems to imply that he gets some enjoyment out of it because he doesn't just go right for the kill. He
toys with them.
savors maybe
Yeah.
or something like that. And I thought that was pretty cool. I will admit to being while watching this movie a little bored and being like, let's get to it. And the gore was there is like no gore.
well, there's
in
like
this movie.
there's like the one shot of when she opens up the closet and that body just like falls and you see the blood all over. But yeah, it's not
It's just
it's not
it's
gory.
the most minor gore. It could be a PG-13 movie by today's
Like
standards.
movies that he had done earlier, like Assault on Precinct 13, are far more violent.
Yeah.
Like, and then you get the thing,
Yeah.
which is
It's all
Jesus.
gore and
Yeah.
stuff. Like I couldn't help but wonder, like even when he kills the lady in the car, which by the way was very like clever, is the way she suspects she's not alone as she sees the fog, and then he comes out from the back seat and just chokes her to death. And then you see a knife, like it slices across, but you don't see like the blood come out.
Right.
I was very much like, come on, man, I like a little gore. Come on,
Yeah,
Carpenter.
it's very subtle. Everything's very subtle, and but because of that subtlety, again, the legacy goes that you can have Jason, 5 years later, pick someone up in a
Sleeping
sleeping
bag
bag
or
and
whatever.
bash them against a tree until they're like a pretzel.
Yeah.
Or put a hatchet through somebody's head. Like you can get some heads rolling. Which I mean, eventually, Mike Myers is doing that. I remember seeing Halloween Resurrection, which is a dumb movie, where Mike Myers just walks by a girl with his kitchen knife and lops her head clean off like a guillotine, and I'm like, how is that thing made of? Like, is that thing a lightsaber?
So let me be very clear. Like I used to make knives with my uncle and stuff. So like it doesn't matter how strong you are at something. You can try to cut someone's head off with an axe. Unless the axe is real sharp, it's going to snag on the bone, and you're going to have to do it again.
Yep.
Like if it can't cut through wood,
No
it's
personal
gonna have,
experience,
It's
but-
going to have no personal experience, of course.
but you're right.
Like in like how heavy the blade is will amplify how much force it has. Not to mention it's a kitchen knife. It's made for cutting vegetables.
Yeah.
Like
At worst, it's made for cutting like venison.
Yeah,
Like at
you could-
sharpest.
it's hard to cut, and I've never tried this, just to be clear, so no one's like, Rob, are you okay? It's hard to cut your hand off with one of those. Getting through a bone, it's tough.
Yeah. So when someone is standing on top of
He's
like a
not-
stairwell
even if he
and he
is-
just swings it just like at arm's length and a head just goes doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, that person's head had to have been already severed.
Yeah. Even if he is ridiculously strong,
Right.
the strength doesn't matter. The blade matters.
Right.
So I'm like, this is something these movies, and again, like Michael Myers isn't about style. He picks a guy up and he stabs him through the stomach.
Gets it over with.
Yeah, like he
Yeah.
he doesn't get it over with. The strangling takes like a minute, but
Right.
like he doesn't do frills, and I kind of respect that about this.
He's
killer.
a man, gets
He's
the
a,
job
he's
done.
a man's man.
He's not
Like,
showing off. He's not someone like Freddy Krueger who's a big show off. Who's like, I'm gonna turn into a television and then throw you into a television. It's prime time, bitch. And it's like, yeah. Again, I should also note a lot of people hate Freddy Krueger because of that. Because he's a showboat. Because he's so like check it out. I'm turning my hand into a scorpion or something like that. And everyone's like,
Yeah.
shut up, Freddy.
And there is this
Stupid
and this
asshole.
is the part of and maybe we should do a bonus episode on the remake because I have some stuff to say about it. But like the new Jamie Lee Curtis Halloween, there has some moments where they kept the essentials of who he is the same, but they've just updated it. There's a part where and then some of my favorite stuff is when you just see him in the house. It's not in this movie. I think it's in 2. Where it's a dark room and some kids are watching a scary movie. By the way, in this movie, they watch the original 1950s The Thing.
Huh, how about that?
You see the title card come up just like Carpenter's, and I was like, oh, this is where he was like, oh yeah, I love this movie. I'm gonna put it in here. Maybe
Yeah,
I'll make it. Maybe I'll make it one day. Wink, wink, or
Wink,
whatever.
wink, and it's gonna be
Great.
something else.
But so it's in the second one, I think, and they're watching it, and everything else is pitch black behind them, but there's like light from the windows, and you just see his shadow behind these kids, and he picks up the knife, and he sees someone come in, and he just puts it down and walks back for a bit. That was the idea of that was terrifying.
Yeah.
Because there have been plenty of times when you're watching the movie or you're watching a scary movie in your dark home at night and you go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You go, and you turn around and you're like,
Yeah,
no,
that's
I'm
the
all right.
ultimate. It's also the scene in Scream where Jamie not obviously not Jamie Lee Curtis, the nerd character. I can't remember the actor's name.
Jesse or
No, the actor's Jamie something.
okay.
And he's laying drunk on the couch, and he's like, "Look behind you! Look behind you!" He's like watching Nightmare, or he's watching the original like Friday the 13th, and Ghostface is walking behind him, and he's like thinking about doing it. And he's like, "Nah," and just keeps walking. Like, it's good. It's
Yeah,
good.
and like that's scary and funny. The Michael Myers one is just scary because he's just in your house. He's just kind of taking his time. He doesn't fuck around when he kills you, but he wants to savor the kill, so he waits.
Yeah, he's a predator. Like he's
Yeah.
almost like, but he's not a supernatural entity. And I think one of the other problems is you know what he was originally named in the credits.
What do you mean?
The Michael Myers. He's not listed as Michael Myers in the credits.
What is he listed as?
They call him the Shape.
Oh yeah. No, I saw that. Yeah.
They call him the Shape, which gives him like this supernatural edge to it.
Yeah.
But
Also, his hair color changes.
yeah.
He has dark hair, but he's blonde as a kid. Doesn't make sense. Anyway,
so maybe
but
dyed
in the remake,
Some
there's
prison dye.
in a remake, he's waiting to get his kitchen knife because it's his weapon. It's kind of a cool little scene. He walks into an old woman's house and he has a hammer, and you just see like these brutal strokes.
Yeah.
And then there's just blood on the hammer, and he drops it, and he takes her kitchen knife, and he like, I have my weapon back now.
Yeah.
And then he walks through another. There's kids walking around outside. It's Halloween. It's brightly lit, which is why I like it. I like bright horror sometimes.
Yeah, it's
And, She's
again,
watching.
Texas Chainsaw
she's
comes
watching
to
some
mind.
kids. Yeah, she's watching some kids walk by the house, and Michael Myers just comes up behind her, and it's just like a 40-year-old woman, and he grabs her hair and slams her head into like her. Like this wooden frame of her couch, the back of her couch, and she just screams because she just realized she's being murdered, and then he stabs her through the neck, and it's done. It's about 15 seconds, maybe. It's a real quick murder,
But it's brutal.
But it's no frills, and it's the brutality of it was like that's the stuff that I like, and I feel like all the other stuff have gotten away from it, and I feel like it has. Not to be too smug here to get to the end combo, I feel like it has lowered the bar for what we expect from horror and for what we are afraid of. Because I think that is more afraid or is more terrifying than like Michael Myers coming up with an elaborate way to skin you alive or something.
Right.
Like that might take longer, but the overt sheer shock of you're being killed, I think is worse in a way.
Yeah, it's all of these have become so, and I think also because this, it's spent so long at first, because all these original movies scared audiences
Yeah.
because they hadn't seen anything like it before, and then they became commodified, and they're like, now people come for the kills, they come for the gore. They come to see the they don't care about the plot, they don't care about that, they want.
But that was the thing that made us like the movies in the first place.
right.
I mean, not like the plot, but like the horror and like there's nothing I like more than growing accustomed to a real good group of characters and then watching them get horribly killed off. Like Green Room is a good example of that.
Right. Or,
'Cause, like,
or
I like
watching
those
Game of
people.
Thrones over time, is
Yeah, and like I noticed that in this movie, I like Laurie and her friends.
Yeah.
They're kind of.
I like
fun.
Dr. Loomis. Like
Yeah.
he's an interesting character.
He's a bit much.
Yeah, but I like that you're professional. Like the man who knows what's up is unhinged.
Yeah.
Like you can't
Yeah, I like
trust
that.
him. Like you don't know what's going on inside Loomis's head. He's a man on a mission.
I like that I spent 8 years trying to save him, and I spent 6 years trying to make sure he never got out again.
Mm.
By the way, in so many of these movies, they're transferring him to a thing, and he gets out. Maybe just stop with that.
Yeah. Just maybe.
Now
yeah.
I know that the new Halloween is only a sequel to like the first two, so it's kind of a more
Right. It's immediately after, and then he spends all that time in prison.
yeah. But the first one happens too. They're transferring him for a court date, and he gets out. It's so dumb. Stop trying to. What do you want to like? Gotta dot the T's and cross the I's.
Yeah,
Like, what's going on with the
eventually,
paperwork?
Eventually, you just gotta fasten that capital capital punishment charge.
I'm gonna. I still want to do the bonus episode where we talk about some of our favorite horrors. Do you still want to do that?
I might want to wait on that because it's gone a little late and I got to get back.
Okay, fair enough.
I'd be glad to do that next time.
Okay, that's
good, but I'm a little kind of tired.
Okay, fair enough. So I wanted to wrap up by talking about, like, I think while these movies are good, I say these movies meaning like the three big ones: the Fridays, the Freddy Krueger,
the Nightmares,
the
the Fridays, and the Halloweens.
I think they led horror astray because what those movies did was take the horror of their day and try to bring it, I use air quotes here, more down to earth. Maybe at least in the idea of like a Halloween or maybe not Freddy Krueger because it's like dreams and it's a little more conceptual.
Freddy's a little more supernatural. Freddy's a little bit more of a ghost story because he's technically a ghost.
Yeah, think about the horror movies before these movies.
Were a lot of psychological kind of things.
Yeah,
I mean,
like
you had
The Exorcist and stuff. Like they were about different things, and I think the horror movies that these inspired took the wrong lessons about how to ground horror. There's great horror movies that are just about like a dude.
Well, I think a movie that Halloween owes everything to is Psycho. Like, because Psycho has, is a person in a costume knifing people. And it's still pretty, like, one of my favorites is when the guy's going up the stairs and the camera is up and you just see Norman in the Mama Bates wig and everything just immediately come out a door, like you barely have time to register it, and she sends that knife down and he just falls back with blood across his face.
Yeah.
Like it's 1960, it's still black and white, it's pretty gut-wrenching, it's pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
And you get almost 10 years later and you get Halloween, which feels like the natural evolution of that.
I agree with that.
Because there were other knockoffs of Psycho that were going around that time, but the slasher really didn't begin until then. You know, like everyone talks about, it's like movie genres, like, oh, there were a bunch of garage bands that were doing punk, but punk really didn't get started until 1977 with the Ramones. And it's like, well, there were other people who were doing things like that, but obviously, like, those horror hounds know it.
Yeah.
Wes Craven did, Last House on the Left, which is a gory, terrifying revenge thriller, but you didn't get, something what everyone kind of considers nuanced, like Halloween. And then it's just like all the production companies are like, this is pretty effective. Let's bring all these guys back, and we don't have to really worry about actors too much because it's mostly just a guy in a costume. It's only Robert Englund playing Freddy that they were like, we just got to get the same guy, but multiple people played Jason, multiple people played Freddy.
Yeah.
Played Michael, Kane Hodder and all them.
They've sort of devolved horror movies into like just death movies where people say like, oh, this movie's great. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, is it really scary? Like, yeah, like there's a scene where a guy gets cut into squares. And I'm like, no, but is it scary is what I asked. Like, not is it
violent?
Is it violent? And again, I'm not I think horror movies don't always have the best violence just because it's gory.
Right.
I think like Game of Thrones upped the ante when it came to violence in a lot of ways by just being unflinchingly real a lot of times, except for like,
in a setting that's not supposed to be real.
Yeah, exceptions being like when you crush a man's head.
He had like a grape.
Or even like not even necessarily things like that, but like a movie like No Country for Old Men. That is not a horror movie.
No,
and that is,
but it is a horror movie.
That is way more violent than anything
and psychologically a character
it depends on like how you view it, because like is Johnny Depp becoming a pool of blood worse than Anton Chigurh putting the what's it called
the cattle
the air pressure
the cattle gun,
the cattle killer or whatever up to your head and you're dead real quick, or whatever.
It's the method behind it,
or the part, just the opening of the movie where he just strangles a guy with his own handcuffs, and he does it so hard that the guy just blood tears out of his neck. Like,
and the only reason Anton Chigurh is not considered a horror character is because he
works for the cartel.
Yeah, he's a man who works for.
He punches a time card.
Yeah, he's a hired hitman. Like Michael Myers is essentially, at least in the first movie, no different in capability or power aside from like obviously Anton Chigurh has a vague background like military and things like that. Like he knows urban combat.
He knows how to use a gun.
Right, but he also knows how to make a firebomb, and he knows how to do all these other things. He knows how to use drugs and things like
Who
that.
do you think would win?
I think Chigurh's got Mike Myers pinned. Like all he's got to do is put a shotgun to his head.
But we're doing another death battle, Justice League versus the Boys. Like durability, though, and this is what I kind of don't like about the Halloween is he gets shot 5 times.
Yeah, they open fire on him,
and he just like, and also it's like one of those ridiculous things. Like he has to fall off the edge, but he's in the middle of the room, so he just stumbles back for like 9 feet and then trips and falls over. And I was like, oh, all right. But I was like, but he gets up and he walks away.
Yeah, because they blink for one moment, he's gone.
Silly. I would think it would be much, and I stand by this. I know some people probably disagree. I think it's scarier if you shoot him a couple times, he falls off, and you see him get up wounded, but just like run away.
Mm-hmm.
He's not like he's human, but like you can't. That's nothing to him. It's just pain.
Yeah,
he'll staple the wound shut and he'll be fine.
I think that's something, and
I would probably kill him.
Right, and
if we're going with, if we're going with he's just a man, but
right, he would just blow his head off. But,
Josh Brolin did get the jump on him in that one fight.
Yeah.
There's that great scene where like where you see Chigurh's footsteps under the door and the doorknob gets shot out and hits Josh Brolin
on the chest.
But then like as Brolin takes a second to like get his bearings, Chigurh like follows the truck or whatever that Josh Brolin crashes and he looks, and then you see Josh Brolin go, or what's his name?
Javier
Bardem, yeah. You see him just go like, oh, and he gets it just before like, and
yeah, he gets
Brolin tags him.
Yeah, he gets him right there and causes a pretty lethal wound.
So he's capable of being outsmarted.
Right.
I don't know. Just fun to talk about which killer would survive.
Well, it's almost like by making Michael Myers seem to have no vulnerability, I think that's probably what Carpenter is trying to do, is be like, this man is so motivated by his desire that he has ceased to be human. He has become something more.
I think that's
pure driven evil. And I think at the time that's super compelling.
I agree.
It's just now the sponge has been dried very, very effectively.
Now that's every movie.
Yeah.
Every B budget directed DVD.
Which slashers are kind of done now mostly. Like you don't really get them.
Or you know what would have been really cool is like maybe after he's like he sees Ramis or whatever, he pins Ramis to the wall. Ramis, that's his name, right? Loomis.
Dr. Loomis. You're thinking of Harold Ramis.
Harold Ramis.
he gets Egon Spangler up against the wall.
Okay, but like after he's got Loomis on the wall, Loomis pulls out the gun and just shoots him, and it doesn't do anything, and he just strangles him to death.
Yeah,
or whatever. That would have been that way. Like it's like like you shot me, and I'll probably die eventually. But
get your ass down from there.
Yeah. But that's good stuff.
I love Don Pleasance in that movie.
He's good.
He makes it work.
Some of those scenes, though, man, I do question the editing. I'm like, let's get back to the Michael Myers.
Evil has come to your town, Sheriff.
Yeah, we could squeeze in another dead person if you just get rid of these dumb kids for a second. Like,
there could be some more dead meats. Like, there's always room for another dead meat.
I think it's like watching like you know what? I'll compare it to a movie you like. It's sort of like watching Brick, knowing what he's gonna do, but sort of seeing some of the embers in this movie.
Well, I would recommend watching the original Assault on Precinct 13.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
Where
I didn't know that sounded like an action movie.
It is an action movie, but it's also kind of a zombie movie. It's a weird one, man. It's a weird one, man.
He says twice.
Because Assault on Precinct 13 is like a group of cops and criminals and a couple other people are stuck in a precinct where they've been besieged by almost an endless horde of thugs, and they have to like shoot them off and keep them away, but they essentially stop becoming people and they're just zombies essentially. They're not actually zombies, but literally it's the same kind of thing where it's like an endless horde of bloodthirsty maniacs, but it's just guys in leather jackets.
They're
and
just-
it's kind
But
of.
who are they? What is it?
Well, they're sent to kill these people because they know too much about something. I barely remember, but it's pretty gory and pretty very 70s exploitation, violent. But it also is kind of like, is this like the vague threat of like the faceless the faceless thug? Like what are you getting at?
Are they all
here?
brown people?
Some of them are. Some of them are. It's a pretty ethnically diverse group of non-people.
Well,
in
kudos to
leather
John
jackets.
Carpenter for making his
But also
horde
the
of
lead is
criminals.
the lead is a black man. So it's kind of and he's like the one who has all the right rules and he's got a shotgun.
Yeah.
But that's a gorier, more violent and sometimes shocking movie than Halloween is. Like compared to the rest of John Carpenter's oeuvre, I guess it's pretty tame.
I'm gonna give you 2 points for using the word oeuvre.
And just adding a little oeuvre.
No, I think if I'm honest, like I think The Thing is his masterpiece, and this is just like his.
I mean, I do like Escape from New York,
Escape from New York is great.
Big Trouble in Little China, or
Is Escape from
fun.
L.A. Is that after or is that before?
It's after. It's way after. It's
Are they
like
both-
1990.
Oh, is it really? Are they
Yeah.
both Kurt Russell though?
They're both Kurt Russell.
Yeah, Escape from New York is better.
Well, infinitely better. Yeah.
But no, I think I think when it comes to horror, The Thing is like his magnum opus,
No.
and Halloween is like his. Oh, look at that! That's not bad.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I think
I think we can talk more horror next time.
Yeah.
Because I got a couple other things I wanted to check out. We can just have a nice little post Halloween.
Yeah, I'll try to watch one or two more so I can have some cool fresh ones for the bonus episode.
I actually think I got another John Carpenter I want to watch.
Which one?
Prince of Darkness.
Prince of Darkness. What is that?
It's a mid-90s one that I've heard people recommend a lot.
I've
Then
never-
he's also got In the Mouth of Madness, which is his Lovecraft kind of story.
I've heard that. I've seen that one.
You're being rude. Can we buy and sing? No. Okay, yes. Love you.
Bye, guys. we're kind of done anyway.
Yeah, we were done. This has been The Movie Date with Rob and Matt, a podcast for people who love movies but don't want to be smug about it. You can check us out on iTunes,
YouTube,
the Facebooks, Podbean, and the free Podbean app. We'll have a bonus episode in the next probably 7 days-ish.
7 days.
Yeah, for some of our favorite horror movies.
Yeah,
And
we'll just have a nice little, just a horror talk.
just talking about horror movies.
And if anything horrific happens in the next 7 days, we'll
talk about that too, I guess.
No, well, talk about anything in the movie news or anything like that. But
Oh, you mean like Jared Leto's Joker canceled from the Snyder Cut?
Jared Leto kills the whole crew.
Oh no,
That'd be terrible.
would be terrible. Don't wish that. That's
I don't
all
wish.
I'm looking
I don't,
forward to.
I don't
it
wish
on.
that on anybody.
Yeah, you do.
No, I
I'm
don't.
kidding. All right.
Have a happy Halloween. Go vote.
Yeah, go
And
vote.
go
Early
vote.
voting. Still have 7-ish days
7
left.
days.
7 days left. Anyway, you guys have a good one. Take it easy.